Hey everybody, this is Jack. To those of you joining us live, welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving up some time on a Sunday. This video is called How Do I Find the Right Man? How do I find the right guy? So I'm going to riff on that for a little bit. If you're here live, feel free to introduce yourself. Let me know where you're from and let me know your questions, because I will be doing some live Q&A, and I'll try and get to it in the order that it comes in. So I get asked this question a lot. You know, how do I find the right guy? How do I know if he's the right guy? Subsets of that could be like, how do I know if I should continue to invest? Which is kind of like, if you knew he were the right guy, you would continue to invest. How do I let something go when I know it's not the right guy? So I wanted to start with a bit of a kind of meta frame that how I would approach this question, and it's kind of simple, and then there's lots of complexity that sits under that. So I kind of have a two-step process for this, really. Number one is be yourself, right? From a perspective that if you are yourself, the more you allow your truth, your essence, the real you to shine through, the more the right guy can be attracted to you. Right? And if you're not being yourself, or if you're playing games or having a mask or just kind of far away from your own center, then it's much harder to attract the right guy. So that's kind of step one. And we can talk more about that. Be yourself. And then step two is trust your intuition, right? Like, in a way, you only need to know it's the right guy when you know it's the right guy. And that can sound a little tautologist or fancy or something, but it's actually really simple. It's kind of like, unless you have a knowing that it's the right guy, until you have that knowing, he's not yet the right guy. And a big part of dating and relationship can be so much easier when we get closer to ourselves, you know, when we can trust ourselves, when we can trust our intuition. And your intuition may not be loud. It may not come online in a certain relationship for weeks or months. So it doesn't have to be there right at the beginning. But if you knew that, kind of when you knew you could somewhat trust that, and that's not an absolute guarantee that the relationship will work out, but it's a pretty good proxy. It's a pretty good kind of shortcut to, is this the guy that you want to continue to invest and be in relationship with? And most of the time, what's happening is we're getting too far away from ourselves, and we're overthinking, we're over intellectualizing, we're over rationalizing, we're trying to think our way through the answer. And we may be doing like, and I can remember this kind of, you know, makes me smile now, but kind of from my relationship past, right? Get a piece of paper and I draw up like pros and cons and kind of like try and work it out and think about it. Or I do pros and cons across 3 people that I was connected with at a time and try and figure it out. And it's so much noise. It's so much churning that it's really hard in that situation just to slow it right down and kind of notice, like, do I have any knowing about this kind of guy? And if you don't have any knowing, what is it that you know? Like, do you know even that you want to continue to connect? Do you know that there's something that you're learning in the relationship? And actually that's valuable, and that's why you're hanging around. So when we're not in our intuition, where are we? Normally we're in our fear or in our doubt. And when we're in our fear and doubt, of course, it's really hard to get clarity, you know, because our fear has an anticipatory quality. It wants to be in the future. It wants to know where things are going. It wants to protect us, stop us making mistakes. Our doubt is niggly and says, are you sure? Are you sure he's the guy? Are you sure he's the one? Are you sure he's going to show up? And you can just notice from that, there's kind of like a contracted quality to what's going on. And when people say, you know, how do I know if I'm in my intuition, or how do I know if I'm in my doubt? Yeah, that discernment is at times really freaking hard. And I know that from experience. And it's only in the practice that you get to know yourself more, and you get to kind of know your own sound. You know, like if you had a tuning fork and you were kind of dinging a tuning fork, it's like there is probably a sound, a frequency, a vibe, a kinesthetic response that is your kind of knowing. You know, some people get knowing in their guts. Some people get knowing it's just like something drops in, almost like clairaudience, or like a spoken word, or like or like a yeah. And so a big part of this can also be opening up your own curiosity and inquiry into how do you tap your intuition, because this won't just be about guys or relationships. This will serve you in and across all kind of areas of your life. So let's just quickly see who's here. Hey, I don't know if I'm going to butcher your name. I apologize. Oxen, you're from Vancouver. Awesome. Love Vancouver. Have family up there. Hey, Marty, how you doing? Hey, Audrey, Massachusetts. Awesome. I'm sure that's beautiful at this time of the year. Hey, is it Agi? Eva from Czech Republic. Awesome. Love Prague. I've never been further from that in Czech Republic. Hey from Dallas. I have not been to Dallas, but I have been to Texas and I like it down there. Yo from the Netherlands. Was almost going to go to the Netherlands when I was back in England last month. Ola Jack, I was wondering why you do no video. Yeah, I've kind of been on vacation, and I've actually been doing my best to kind of honor being on vacation, because it's sometimes hard to be completely unplugged, and I will be kind of back in the fold ongoingly, so hopefully more often around. But hey to you, Nikki. Hey, Suzusa from Budapest. I hear great things. I have not been. And Ola from Portugal. And hey, Nicola. Oh, wow, this is really cool. This is a very diverse group of people from all over the world. And hi, Sophia from New York. So thank you all. Keep the introductions coming. And just let me know if you've got any specific questions that you'd like me to answer. I tend to do well kind of responding to specific questions. So let me have it. Let me know what's going on for you. Let me know where your pain is. Let me know how I can help. And we've got Toronto and Scotland. Hi, is it Jurate or Jurati and Angie? Cool. Keep it coming, guys. So the questions that you ask, I'll answer any question. This focus of this video is around how do I find the right guy, because it seems like when you kind of unpick everything, it's like that's sometimes just a fundamental question that people are answering. One of the things I did want to say is I often encourage people to frame this question like, how do I find the right guy or the right man, and frame it in the singular. Because I hear people say things, perhaps if you've had frustration in your dating life, and I get it, a lot of us have been there, and you might be saying like, well, where are all the good men? Or like, how do I meet good men? And sometimes it can just be useful to frame it in the singular, like, how do I meet the right man? Because it can be a bit easier in the sense, we've only got to find one guy, and there's 3.5 billion of us, basically, maybe not all fully grown men, but there's a lot of us out there, and you'll need to find one that you have a connection with, where you feel like you can be yourself, where you both want similar things, where you both want to grow together. And I think when people are always asking, well, where are all the good men? It doesn't get them closer to the thing that it is that they may actually be looking for, And another approach that I'll encourage people into is, in a way, how do you meet the right person? So you can do a lot in the external, right? You can do a lot on getting yourself out there, putting yourself in the right communities, going to the right workshops or groups or practices. Maybe you want to meet a conscious guy, and so you want to go to meditation groups or yoga or personal growth workshops, or kind of the environments where that kind of guy might be. And if you know that you're kind of stuck and you're spending too much time kind of ruminating about this question, and actually we need to get you into action, that can be really powerful, is to look at like, what are you doing in the external? How are you putting yourself out there? Are you just coming into contact with life? Whether you're meeting Mr. Right or not, what is the quality of contact that you are bringing to life? How aware are you? How alive are you? How much are you following your desires? How much are you in your power and expression? And all of that can also be really important. So there's what you do in the external, but there's also just, are you kind of bringing you? And of course, all of us have blocks to that. All of us, that's not just like, oh, cool, yeah, let me be myself. That's like a lifelong journey. I certainly feel like that for me. And I know there are times where I'm just like, yeah, I'm kind of a bit more expressed here. I'm feeling more myself. I'm feeling more connected to life. You can walk down a street. You don't even have to look anyone in the eye and feel connected to life. And if that doesn't make sense to you, I just encourage you to be curious about that. Like, what is it that has you feel more or less connected to the flow of life, to your surroundings, to the natural world? Because the more you're in that expression and the more you are connected to yourself, the more likely it is that you might attract in the right guy. Now, this is not a short-term strategy. This is not necessarily you do this and then next week you meet the guy. This is like a long-term play. This is the more you can find yourself and find your center and find your expression, the more likely it is that you are going to be in the right, you hear people talking about being in the right vibration. For years, I would hear that. It didn't really resonate with me as language, but for whatever language that works for you, being in the right space, mindset, attitude, heart frame, aliveness, whatever it is that works for you, the more you're in that, the more you're just attracting what it is that you want into your life. Now, I don't hold that this is not just a kind of law of attraction thing. It's right. Like there's a lot of complexity that goes into life and finding the right person, but we're trying to help you find the simplicity on the inside of that complexity. And the simplicity on the inside of it is, how much am I being myself? How much am I following my intuition? And if you did nothing else from this live stream, but took those two questions and put them in your journal. And anytime you wanted to kind of work on your relationship life, you hit your journal and you just inquire, you just journal into those questions. How much am I being myself? What do I know about that? What do I notice about it? How much am I following my intuition? How connected to myself am I? How much am I trusting myself? And just kind of get honest about those things. And it doesn't actually matter whether you're like, wow, I'm 90% myself or I'm 10% myself. The real question is kind of how much are you noticing that and how much are you practicing, right? Maybe you've been in an environment where it's really hard to be yourself, right? Sometimes, if you are in a career or job expression that's not really having you feel alive, or maybe you've got friendships that you need to let go, or maybe you're stuck in certain areas of your life. I get it. I've been there. It can be really hard. And if you take aim at this over a long enough time, it's like, I'm gradually allowing into my life and letting out of my life the things that really feel like they are aligned with me. The things that are true to me is another way of saying that. And if you want an authentic relationship with a guy, it's much easier to have that when you're kind of in your truth, expression, freedom, love, pick what word works for you in that. But like, you're kind of like, yeah, this is kind of me. This is me being real. This is me. And even if I just feel into that now, I'm like, yeah, it's vulnerable to be real, right? It's vulnerable in a world that isn't always that real. And, a work environment, a political environment, a cultural environment that's not necessarily that real. It can be hard to really have the courage to step into being yourself and to have the trust behind that you being yourself. Not only is that a good thing, it's like that is the path for most of us that want an authentic relationship. That is the path, is to step into that and trust that life will provide for you, right? That life will bring you the relationship life that you want, not necessarily in the short term, right? It might not be overnight, it might not be next week, but in the long term of you kind of really allowing yourself to tune into you, to express you, that is the path. And by the way, even if you don't end up in the short or medium term in the relationship you want, you're kind of already winning, right? You're already winning because you're already more expressed, more alive, more radiant, more you. So it's like, that's already a really good thing. And then the relationship can kind of add to that as more of an icing in a sense than I'm spending all this time working at getting a guy. And if I don't get that outcome, I feel really disappointed and frustrated, right? Rather than, perhaps I'm working on things that are just important to me. And of course, I'd love to be met there, but I'm whole already in a sense, and I'm working on me, and I'm inviting these things into my life. So that's kind of the way that I'm setting this up. A few more quick hellos. Okay. Hi, Maria from Sweden. Hi, Gabriella, also from Sweden. Nicola's in London. Yay to Oslo. Hey, Audrey. Please always end up with unavailable men. Okay, I'll come back to that. Hey, Linda, I realize that I truly love the male perspective you're waking me to. May I never be the same. Wow, that's great. Audrey, what could I be sending as the wrong signal? Okay. Hi, Jack. Good to see you. I just want to find the right man for me. Could it be that I'm spending too much time on this? That's a great question. Maria, you love my videos. Thank you. Okay, so let me just double click on that for a second. Audrey's question here. Always end up with unavailable men. So the first thing, just in case any of you watching or listening to this haven't, I do have a video called 4 Reasons You May Be Attracting Emotionally Unavailable Men. So if you haven't watched that, I would just encourage you, because that might say it better than even some of the things I'm able to say live with you. So one of the aspects that I know in that video resonated with people, or at least opened up a different line of inquiry than they might have been in, is this is looking at whether you have some kind of frustration pattern that lives within you, right? So if we say that attracting emotionally unavailable men, or just unavailable men, whether they are not going to commit to you, or they're married, or they're whatever, attracting unavailable men is a form of frustration, right? Because it's like there's a thing you want and you don't really get to have it, right? Maybe you get to date with it, maybe you get to have fun romantic weekends, but you don't really get to have that relationship fully. And so that's a frustration. And there are, of course, things that you can take action on in the external that might have you feel less frustrated, right? Like going after your dreams or pursuing things that you want to pursue. And it can be really profound. And I know it was in my own life, just to notice like, could it be true that I have a frustration pattern kind of within me? maybe from childhood, maybe from that's just what I came in with, maybe from all sorts of reasons, maybe unavailable parents. But without getting into the analysis of why that is, just noticing, could it be true that I have that? And maybe you don't, but if you were to notice, maybe, yeah, I'm kind of a little frustrated at times. I'm sort of frustrated with life. Like if there's a frustration quality between you and life a lot of the time, then of course it's easy for a man to plug into that, right? And just to amplify it. Because like you're now like, wow, I was already frustrated. And now life keeps putting these unavailable men in my path. Like, how is that fair? How is that helping me? And I'm not going to say that any of this is super easy to do. This is real inner work that I'm talking to you about. But real inner work in this situation might be to notice, so when I'm feeling frustrated, what do I do? Am I able to be with my frustration? Am I able to presence it? And, even you can speak something out loud, right? Like, I'm frustrated right now, or there is frustration here right now. And in a way, you're learning how to metabolize your relationship with frustration. And I realize that's quite a few strange words if you've never thought about this, but just kind of hang in there. So you're learning how to digest, be with, nourish yourself in the context of, I'm feeling some frustration. And I want to suggest, and it's not like this is a guarantee, but in my experience of coaching quite a lot of people in this sort of territory and my own practice, the more you shift your relationship with frustration so that you're no longer kind of frustrated with your frustration, the more life will start to show you things that aren't just the frustrated quality that you experience when there's something that you want that you can't have. Now, of course, in life, as mature adults, we have to realize sometimes there just are things in life that we want but can't have, whether that's a partner or whether that's a raise or a better job or live somewhere else or whatever it is that, life isn't just about getting what you want, right? Like to get what you want all the time that's, you just got to look at Buddhism. That's not the recipe for living a present and fulfilled life where we minimize our own suffering. And the more you notice your own relationship with frustration, the more life might start to offer you like, oh, I get it. You actually, what you want is not to be frustrated in love. So partly you might notice more quickly, this guy actually isn't available, right? Because what you don't want to do, ideally, is fall in love with the unavailable guy, right? You want to be able to discern with a little bit of sobriety on the front end, this guy isn't available. And that would be frustrating for me to try and get in a relationship with him. And you might say, well, look, yeah, that's great, Jack, but I don't really realize that until I've already developed feelings for him. Okay, so what are you going to do about that? Like, if I was bringing a bit of tough love, maybe you need to slow it down. Maybe you need to put more space between dates. Maybe you need to notice if you're fantasizing and projecting onto a guy and learn how to be more sober about people as you're in the early stages of relating. Because sometimes, not always, frustration about this goes hand in hand with kind of loving falling in love, right? Where people are like, they get so wrapped up in the, oh, this guy, or I'm so in love, or this could be it, or it's going to be amazing. And it's like there's such a lack of sobriety on the front end that it's like life just says, oh, okay, cool. At some point, you're going to crash because you weren't really able to see with a little bit of objectivity what was actually here, and that's a whole journey, learning how to see things with a bit more objectivity, particularly when our heart and our emotions are involved. That can be really difficult. But if you can learn how to see unavailable guy earlier, right, even by having a good friend and downloading after your dates and having them reflect back to you like, does this guy really seem like he's available for a relationship? And I know one of the things that makes this harder is that not every unavailable guy walks around saying, hey, I'm unavailable, just so you know. It's like sometimes as guys, we can lack our own clarity about that. But your job is really to have the clarity as much as you can on your side of the fence. All right, let me go back up here. Sending you so much love, Maria. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm wondering how to meet someone as I'm disabled and have trouble doing things others do. I don't drink and I'm not religious. How do I meet people? Well, that's a good question. I can imagine the sort of the structural barriers to that. I mean, luckily, I guess, although not everyone has success or good feelings about this area, like we are in the online era. And so much of the dating game has moved online, for better or for worse. So hopefully that does give you a platform to be able to get out there. And here's the other thing, right? I have a sort of view of the world that we all have gifts and talents. We all have frailties and liabilities. We're all just like a mixed bag of that. And sometimes we may need help, right? So sometimes I've challenged my coaching clients, like, okay, so you're saying you want to date, and you're saying you're getting out there and you're putting yourself online, and you're just not really meeting the kind of guys that you want to deepen a connection with. So enroll your friends. Like, what about if you made a request for support to 3 of your best girlfriends and just said, hey, I'm looking to meet people, and it's not happening right now. Is there anyone you could introduce me to? Is there anyone you could set me up on an old-fashioned blind date? I've done that before in the past, and it's kind of fun. And it's surprising to see who might come into your field. So if there's a part of the dating process that this isn't the easiest for me for whatever reason it is there a way that you can bring in support? Some people have the challenge that, yeah, they get it, that they're not very good. They quote their man picker. They find it difficult to select deepening with a good man. So sometimes it's useful to get your friends kind of involved in that process and get some reflection. I always say to people, if you can't really justify the guy to all your best friends, probably there's something that they're seeing that can be useful to you to take on board in your reflection. The other thing you might be able to do is a kind of a wing person strategy, right? Like if you have someone that's kind of social, right, or likes going out or likes partying or connecting with people, you can sometimes find a way to say, hey, can you organize the night out? I'll be there with you, but let's create a little bit of fun energy around this. Maybe 2 or 3 or more of us will go out together. Maybe someone else can organize that, and you can just kind of tag along a little bit on the coattails. So all of that's just saying to kind of broaden your perspective that anything you find hard in the dating process, you don't necessarily have to just do that alone. Linda, sometimes I find that some men are not forthcoming in honesty. In your earlier tapes, you mentioned several ways to get through that simply by asking the right questions. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, totally. And that just to loop us back into kind of where I started this conversation, the more you're dialed into your intuition, the easier it is to know who to trust, right? Because trust isn't really a heart thing. I think for most of us, trust is more of a bodily thing, right? It's more of a gut instinct. Like, how does an animal know who to trust? It's kind of an instinctual thing. So the more you can notice that in your own life, there's trusting men, but there's trusting life, there's trusting yourself. And at least in part, I think these things have some kind of connection. The more you trust life, the more you can trust yourself, have your own back, notice red flags, notice if you feel doubtful about something and it's okay, like if you need longer to figure it out or explore it, the more you can kind of be a good partner to yourself, the easier it is, I think, to learn how to trust the right guy. And hey, for those of you that have been hurt by guys, I apologize. I'm sorry. Sometimes as guys, we do douchebag things, or we've trespassed on trust, or we thought we were trustworthy and we ended up not being, and whatever. And I get it. There's a lot of history to that for most people. So I'm not just trying to minimize or disregard any of that. And nearly always with my coaching clients, what I found is if you dig in there a little bit, most people are like, well, there was that red flag, right? Or there was that how come he's canceling all these dates, or how come he seems to still be really tight with his ex-girlfriend, or there's some things along the way where life is giving you a little bit of a breadcrumb trail to notice, really, this guy, really? So when those questions are coming up, I really want to encourage you to be good to yourself and take the time. Again, I'm a fan of journaling. Maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't, but kind of collect yourself and inquire, be with the question of, is this guy really trustworthy? And also notice how other men treat him, other men that you respect, because men also have their own way of noticing guys and how much they are trustworthy, how much they show up, how much they keep their word. Pixie, hey. Pamela, hi. Mint, yo. Warsaw, awesome. My parents went on holiday there a couple of years back, told me good things. I've never been to Poland. Definitely, it all starts internally. It took me a long time to realize. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say I've kind of realized that for a lot of the last probably decade at this stage, and I still need lots of reminders of that at times. Hey, Claire from Liverpool, awesome. I haven't been up there in a long time. I did go up there with my work in a previous existence. From Germany, yo. Another hello for Cherry Boo. Hi, I know you often comment on my channel. Hi from New York City. Okay, tips with dating sites and initial dates. Be good to get a man's perspective. Yeah, so I don't really have specific sites to recommend. And part of that is actually because that hasn't really been my path, right? Like I have in the past been on dating sites briefly, but it wasn't really the path that I would use to connect with people. So I also just kind of honor that it's not like I've done a lot of digging in the trenches on some of these different sites. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a fan of what works. So I'm a fan of putting the effort into something, whatever it is, seeing if it works, and then being willing to adjust accordingly. So if you're not having traction on a certain thing, kind of mix up your strategy. For me, dating is a little bit like sales and marketing, to use a business metaphor. And at the end of the day, what works for one person in sales and marketing and another person can be super different. And ultimately, sales and marketing is about, are you kind of getting the results? Are you making sales, or are you bringing leads in, or whatever the right metric? And it's kind of similar with dating, whatever works. Some people like the whole let's chat for a while, and then if we still have kind of rapport, let's meet. Other people are like, look, I don't really care. I'll just meet anyone for half an hour for coffee. I don't want to have all this pen pal thing. So it's kind of finding what allows you to feel as authentic as possible in the dating process. And I don't know if that's necessarily site specific so much as kind of way specific. Is it meeting people in person? So the very first contact you have with them is at a bar or at a course or a workshop or yoga or jogging or with the dog in the dog park, whatever your life is. A lot of people prefer that because it feels more organic. It feels more kind of juicy. There's a lot of information that gets transmitted kind of quickly. And I would therefore encourage you to notice what's working for you. And in terms of actually having dates, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, right? A lot of people, I think, put a lot of pressure that, I've kind of got to date well, as much as possible, I would encourage you to be yourself. And I know that's hard if you're feeling nervous or you're self-conscious, but it's sort of trusting that, the right guy, he's going to be cool with your nervousness and self-consciousness. Right? Like if he's really your guy and he really wants to be with you and he wants to be with you in your authenticity, and part of your authenticity is maybe you're a bit goofy, maybe a bit quirky. I certainly know I'm quirky. It took me a while of people reflecting to me that I'm like, wow, the world thinks I'm more quirky than even I think I'm quirky. Okay, that's cool. That's it. So there's a way that the more you can practice being yourself, even in a connection where you're like, yeah, I'm not attracted to this guy. I don't see this going anywhere. Can I still, for this half an hour, whatever evening that we're together, can I try and be myself? Can I try and find what is my genuine curiosity about the person in front of me? Can I slow down enough with myself to notice what am I actually curious about with you? Not sort of, let me ask you just, some of the kind of more standard questions like, what do you want from your dating, or how long have you been dating, or where do you see this, where do you see your dating life, or what do you want from your dating life? You can include those kind of things. And as much as possible, you can practice just kind of dropping in, staying with yourself, staying present and noticing. It's almost like what wants to be asked. What is a real and alive question or curiosity that can come through me? Because one of the reasons that's great is because it encourages a certain kind of presence. And the more present you are, the more real you are. Normally, the more authentic you are, the more you're like fully here rather than just kind of like tripping out or spinning out in kind of things you already know about yourself. Now, that takes practice, right? It's not easy in front of some stranger just to kind of like, oh, let me kind of be present and notice. But the more you can practice, even 5% gain on that, the more real your dating can become. And what most people want from their dating, yes, they want the outcome, right? They want a relationship that can go somewhere eventually that they can invest in. But until that's happening, most people kind of want to enjoy their dating, right? And they want to feel alive in their dating. And that, I think, comes from being as unautomatic as possible, as kind of real and unfolding and natural in the moment as you can. And that's something that I think is worthy of taking practice. I end up with unavailable men. So weird. They are more interested with, I end up with unavailable men or men that I'm not so interested in. Yeah, okay, so this is interesting. And I'm sure a lot of people, whether they're live with us now or they watch this afterwards, can relate to the fact of, well, the guys I'm interested in aren't interested in me. And the guys that are interested in me, I'm not really interested in, or some kind of version of that. And what's really going on there? And again, I would loop that a little bit into this question of, well, how much are you really being yourself in your dating? Because if you're being yourself, okay, you may or may not be attracted to what's in front of you, but the more you're being yourself, the more likely you are, I think, to find some people that are kind of resonating with the real you. Happen is that you can connect with people at kind of different levels, right? I'm not really fully conversant chakrically. I don't tend to talk chakras too much. But even if you just think of yourself simply as a head, a heart, and a body, there are people that you can relate with in different ways. Sometimes you have a really good intellectual connection with people, right? And you kind of riff You go back and forth. You kind of connect that way. Some people you have a really good heart and emotional connection with. And there's just a kind of ease of being with each other's emotional experience, or you kind of get them, or there's a sense of like, wow, I really know this person, and perhaps that can happen quickly. Sometimes you can have a really good physical connection, right? Like a kind of sexual chemistry with people. Sometimes you get all three. Sometimes you don't. So there's also just this noticing, how am I really connected to this person? And for most of you, you probably want at least a minimum effective dose of each of those connection types, right? You want to have a minimum effective dose of, we've got to have a good enough physical connection, we've got to have a good enough heart connection, and we've got to have a good enough intellectual connection. And probably for a lot of you might even add kind of a spiritual connection as well. Excuse me. Whoa, getting spiritual here. A spiritual connection, so that your kind of general view of life, or what life is, or what's important in life somewhat aligns. And it's just noticing. And sometimes it can be heartbreaking when you notice, wow, we have a great intellectual connection, we have a great physical connection, we're spiritually on the same page, but actually our hearts aren't really that connected, right? Or emotionally, there's a way that we don't really kind of vibe. And sometimes you just have to be honest with life that, like, hey, yeah, we connect in these ways, but not these other ways, and not make that wrong, but also not be at the whim of that, like taking a stand for what it is that you really want. Now, the other thing to check in with, if you're like, they're more interested in me than I am in them, right, is there's a couple of things that could be in there. Sometimes high standards can be in the way, right? So high standards, it's a tricky teaching. It's almost like a two-part teaching, right? If you have low standards, you probably want to raise your standards, right? So if you allow people to treat you badly, or if you allow self-worth issues to get in the way of your dating, or if you are afraid to kind of connect with the men that you really want to connect with, you might want to sort of raise your standards a little bit. Now, once you've done that, or if you've already done that, the name of the game is often is actually discerning what are your standards. Because not always, but sometimes what it can be is your own inner critic projected out onto men. Right? So your standards can sometimes be the things that you don't love yourself for, and that you also now want to hold another person to that sort of standard. And this is subtle, right? Because none of this is about tolerating bad behavior from guys or not being in your power. Absolutely, be in your power, your expression, and your heart as vibrantly as you can. But there's for some of us, a piece of work, and I know this has been part of my past, and maybe sometimes even ongoingly, is to notice, I can put my standards on people as a way of actually making myself safe, that you don't live up to my standard. Right? And then maybe no guy lives up to your standards. So you can sort of say, where are all the good men? I'm not saying that this is true in this particular instance of the question. I'm just saying this is an avenue of inquiry. Where are all the good men? Because actually no one is going to live up to my standards, because no one actually wants to live up to my inner critic being projected out onto them. So there's this very subtle territory about having standards and how much that is actually true, or how much it's really your inner critic that's kind of talking, and an inability to just be with life as it is, that you've sort of got to project standards onto it, and that nothing might be good enough. And it's a subtle way of keeping you safe, because actually no guy is good enough, so you never really have to be vulnerable to be with someone. So that is one avenue, and I can say more about that if it's of interest, but that's one whole avenue to kind of look at when you look at, are guys meeting your standards? Of course, there are loads of men that if I were your good friend, coach, big brother, whatever, I'd be like, yeah, don't date this guy. Right? He's not really showing up in his life. He's not going to show up for you. So that can also be true, of course. So none of this is about tolerating men. It's actually about noticing if there's a little bit of a barrier that you are putting in place. Or if you're like, the ones I love don't love me, you could be in a complex kind of ambivalent attachment pattern, You could be in an attachment pattern where if someone comes close, you back away. And if you come close, they back away, right? A lot of people play that kind of tango. So notice if there could be an attachment piece in there. Also notice if it could be a subtle form of a frustration pattern, right? The frustration that life's never going to give me what I want. I never get to have what I want. And that is, can be a frustration complex. It can also be this thing that I've named in other videos called the frustration object relation. Again, big fancy psychological term. But it really means that from a very early stage in life, your dominant affect, your dominant felt experience is, I don't really get what I want. I'm kind of frustrated with life. And then it's sort of in you, and you're subtly projecting it and experiencing it over and over again. But life doesn't give you what you want. Life doesn't nourish you. And of course, sometimes, and there's probably a lot of us here right now, you can have an incredibly tough path, right? Life can be really tough, and life can throw you, and all sorts of bad things can happen. And it can still be true that there's a thing that if you relax it in you, even if you can't relax it fully, you can just relax it partially. You might notice you get a more nourishing feeling from life, that life is a bit more on your side rather than life is the big, you don't get to have what you want, right? If that is your experience of life ongoingly, that you don't get to have what you want, I would see that as a portal into deeper inner work, potentially. You don't have to take it from me. I'm inviting your own inquiry. I don't know what's true for you, but just there could be an avenue of inquiry that could actually be the spiritual, the real liberation for you. It could be like the keyhole into a much freer experience of being you if you're willing to step into it. How should I go about approaching men in person? That's a great question. Let me just make sure I've caught that. Hello from Denmark. Wow, a lot of you have joined. I'm having to scroll back up. This is great. All right, I'm going to go a little bit quicker here because I'm getting behind. I'm getting behind. Okay. So the best way to approach a man in person, I think, is to smile at him and just hold eye contact. You don't necessarily have to say anything, because that is a sort of behavioral cue. It's a kind of green light, right? That if you're willing to hold eye contact with him and smile and just have a kind of open stance, it's a kind of invitation for the guy to kind of come towards you. Now, not every man will come towards you in that situation, but let's assume that a decent proportion of them might. You can just practice that. If not, you can actually just say hello or ask some kind of innocuous thing about, did you enjoy the class, or how long have you been living here, or whatever it is. It doesn't actually really matter what the content is. It's more about the energetics, I think, of being open. And I think men are pretty tuned into which women are open to them and which women are not. And so if you want to be open to a guy, you can practice trying to open your kind of energy field. Even just, you've probably had this experience at a party. There are some people that are a little easier to approach just because their body language is a bit more open. And sometimes that's vulnerable and difficult, but that would be the thing that I would practice. And no one's going to remember what that opening line is. So even if you say something that afterwards you're like, that's completely ridiculous, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's just literally just opening a door. It's a, hey, how are you? If in doubt, hey, how are you? I'm Sarah. Hey, how are you? I'm Jane. And just see from there. Really what stops us doing that, and I think this is equally true probably of men and women in some ways, is the fear of rejection, right? There's the fear that you're going to say, hey, I'm Jack. And they're going to be like, not interested. And I would just encourage you to work with that, because I think for most of us, we just have to keep using that muscle. I mean, yes, you can do specific work around the fear of rejection. You can notice how much you reject other people, because sometimes people who most fear rejection actually go around rejecting people. And once you clear that up, you're less afraid of it. You can see it a little bit as a numbers game. Yeah, you're going to get some no's, but that doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things. If you're just in your heart and being open to people, that's a great thing, I think. So if someone else can't receive that, normally it's from their own difficulty. I don't have to be attracted into a conversation with you, but if you smile at me, I can at least receive that. Maybe I might smile back, even if I'm just going to walk on, So being open to people, I think generally is a good thing. You don't want to be too open too quickly with the wrong person. But I think a lot of it is about opening up your energy field. And another part of it can actually be tuning a little bit into your sexual instinct, right? So our sexual instinct is partly the instinct that is the be attracted dynamic. And so you can start some people have that as their dominant instinct. Most of us actually don't have that as our dominant instinct. And so you can learn how to just tune in a little bit more to like, where do I feel attraction, right? And again, it doesn't have to be sexual attraction. That can actually just be, I'm attracted to this. Like, I want to go explore it. I'm attracted to this kind of music or taste, food, literature, whatever it is. But it's sort of tuning into that a bit more. Sometimes people that struggle to date or to kind of meet men in that way, it's because they're actually being too nice. They're sort of being like, they're not actually being true to their essence in a certain way. They're sort of talking from a slightly disconnected place or a slightly like safe place, like, hey, let's have some chit chat, but they're not kind of dropped a bit more into what's actually really alive. What am I really present to? So again, you can use this dating as a way of practicing presence and just noticing, if a guy puts some attention on you, what happens? If you put some attention on a guy, what happens? Because there can sometimes be some blocks that you just want to open up. And again, that has nothing to do with you have to go on a date with a guy. It's just literally how much you're responding to life and kind of noticing where there's a bit more of a pull or a push or a yes, and being more connected to that. Yeah, most men don't want to be rejected. If you just think about it as simply as that, most men are happy to have a smile or a connection or just a passing something with a woman. Like most men, gross orienting generalization, enjoy feminine energy or enjoy connecting with women. So the risk there is actually probably not as high as sometimes you might perceive it to be. Every time I get online, I'm attracted to men too far away. Yeah, again, I'm sure lots of people can relate to that. I mean, partly that's a structural phenomenon of our times, right? That we have more kind of global exchange happening. And so it's more likely now that you might meet someone at long distance than probably it was, tens of years ago. And partly you might want, I mean, obviously you can mitigate against that, right? Because you can set your filters on a dating app. So you could just say, yeah, I'm not going to meet anyone beyond a 100-mile radius. So you can kind of take it out that way. I'm a fan of what's true. I mean, if you really meet someone and they're 5,000 miles away and it's actually really a true connection, then it can be mightily inconvenient. I know this from my own life, but I also know it can really work out. Like I know, I flew to Europe to go pursue my now wife, and okay, that worked out. That wasn't necessarily going to work out. So it's more about what's real in the connection, and also just not taking too long before you actually get the real in-person time, right? So I'm not a fan of, we've been emailing for 12 months. I'm not a fan of that because you don't really know what it's like to actually spend high quality time together. And of course, it's difficult. You meet someone and you're like, well, how am I going to afford that? And that's difficult, right? If you don't have the funds to do that, that's just difficult. But you might decide, you know what, I'm going to work an extra, whatever it is, some evening shifts, some weekend shifts, or I'm going to shift some spending and some budget from somewhere else because I don't want to invest a year of my life in an email relationship, right? So it might be like my love life is important enough for me that I'm going to find a way for us to get together, or I'm going to say, hey, if you really want to get to know me, you're actually going to have to come see me. And if the guy can't figure that out, right? Like if the guy really wants to be with you, then he might have to go and do all the weekend shifts or like do whatever, it's like, let him be a guy, let him figure it out. But you might just want to lay that like, oh, there's a threshold. I want to get to know you, but I'm not going to continue to text you every day as if we are in a relationship when we have not had quality in-person time. So you're a guy, you figure it out. And the right guy can rise to that challenge, right? Or if not, if he can't figure out how to make $500 to get on a plane, he might not be the kind of guy that you want to end up investing in anyway, right? I don't know, but it's taking a stand for actually this whole ongoing long distance thing doesn't really serve most people in my experience. I've seen a lot of people get hurt. I've seen a lot of people get on the phone with me in a coaching conversation. They're like, yeah, I'm in this relationship. And when I drill into it, I'm like, I'm sorry, you're not actually in a relationship by the standards that I would hold you being in a relationship, because you've never really met this person. You've never really spent high quality time together. You've never had time to just, even if it's not sexually, just to kind of connect physically in some way. There's a kind of lack of realness about what's actually there. And believe me, most men don't grow by pen pal relationships, right? Most men grow by being in real relationships, whether they end up being long-term or short-term. They grow by actual real connection, real edges, really working something with someone. So, don't feel sorry for a guy who just wants to have a pen pal relationship. Invite him to step up to something. That's Jack's view. You don't have to agree with me. Thanks, Jack. Helped me to have a much better relationship myself. You're welcome. Yvette, thanks for saying hi. Enjoy your work. Sorry, I guess this is slightly funny timeline for Asia or Australia. Slow down is great advice. Yeah, that's just one of those truisms, I think, that there are a few things that get worse. As long as you're not being so apprehensive that you're never willing to take a risk or a step, if you're actually slowing it down to get more present, I think that's great. There was not actually a notification for this chat. I just decided this afternoon with about 20 minutes just to give people notification that it was a 20-minute thing, but it was kind of somewhat spontaneous. Are you aware that you can become easily another unavailable man for us watchers? I haven't had that particularly top of mind, but I'm also not I'm not putting out the energy that I'm looking to connect with anyone that way. I'm a married man. I'm taken. I'm pretty clear about that. Open to any feedback. Your eyes are looking great, Jack. Thank you. I'm grateful that you get to see it. For most of my adult life, I wore glasses because I had a bad experience wearing contact lenses. I used to play soccer at a pretty reasonable level. And I I got really sensitive eyes. And so this whole has been really difficult for me. But I managed to get back into it about a year ago, and I'm grateful because it feels like there's a more immediate kind of connection with people. Shyla, what if your friends are 10 years younger than you? I don't know. Is that a problem? Sounds kind of alive. Let me know if there's like a specific follow-up question to that. Bianco, hello from Denmark. Hey, how you doing? Welcome. Where to find nice men? I've talked about that a little bit, so I'm going to keep going in the questions here. Hello to Colorado Springs. Hello, Squirrel. Okay, you said something about being with a man, sometimes for the sake of learning and not him really being the one. Cool. So what I meant by that is not every connection is about, long-term relationship or marriage. And that's part of our discernment, is what is this connection really about? And it can be difficult because if you fall in love or you have kind of desires that you want to be in a long-term relationship, it can be difficult to be with the sort of somewhat sober reality, like, oh, this guy that I'm connecting with right now, he may not actually be the guy. And I think you get a couple of choices. Let's say you discern that. You get the choices to, okay, so he's not really my guy, and I'm really ready for my guy, so I'm actually going to downshift or break off this connection. Or sometimes you might realize, oh, there's something that this guy has been brought into my life at a kind of, soul level. Why is this guy being brought in my life? There might be something that I'm here to learn with him, and that kind of discernment is not an easy one to make, but it's a valuable one, and it's worth taking aim at. And something might be like, even attracting unavailable men, right? That might be a way of waking you up to like, oh, there's actually this, pattern that I inherited because I always felt like my mom or my dad was unavailable, and I'm kind of recreating that, right? That can be wakefulness, even if that's super freaking painful. Or, this guy and I, we have a really, amazing connection in certain ways, and we kind of pop each other, but actually our relating is this. It's like a roller coaster. And I've got to learn that actually, as exciting and exhilarating and intoxicating as that is, that's not actually a relationship I can build with, right? It's so all over the place. It's such an emotional churn that maybe it's not going to really work for us. There's a lack of ground, or there's a lack of realness and contact. So again, you might, sometimes you have to kind of run that course a little bit to realize like, oh yeah, actually that relationship was teaching me this thing. Sometimes it's a post-event realization. But it's partly permission to not force that every connection has to kind of be the one that you try and really settle down with, right? I often use these distinctions of companion and lover and partner, because not every companion and lover is going to be a good partner to you. Right now, your choice of partner, you might say, yeah, I also want them to be a good friend, and I also want us to be lovers and enjoy that side of our relating. Absolutely. But there are some people that you could have a great lover relationship with, right? It might be very hot and heavy and romantic and whirlwind, but they're just not good material to build a partnership with. That's just not really in the, however you think of it, it's not really what the universe wants. It's not really what's true to you. It's not in the stars. However you think of that, it's just not really what's happening. So permission to notice, if I'm not trying to make a connection, that what is this connection that is really in front of me? What is actually true about it? You need not apologize for the wrongdoings of other people. Thank you. Yeah, when I do that, I'm not doing it from a place of like I feel guilty. I'm doing it to just acknowledge that when I'm, as a man, inviting you to trust yourself more, there may have been some bad experiences that you've had that are making it harder for that. And I'm just acknowledging it. And sometimes just hearing it from a guy like, yeah, you know what? You weren't treated great by someone, and I'm sorry for that. I'm not taking it on as my own burden. I'm just saying to you in a kind of healing way, like, I'm sorry. Like sometimes, and I've had this in the past, sometimes I've not done the thing that looking back, I'd be like, wow, I wish I'd had a better conversation, or I wish I'd been able to be more real and more authentic earlier in that connection. So it's just sort of like, yeah, I'm kind of saying, wow, this is tough and real territory when we all carry our pain and our shame, and sort of just like, wow, I'm feeling that. I'm just trying to be real with you in a certain kind of way. Another hello to Poland. Okay, there's a lot of Polish contingent here. Hey, welcome. Mrs. Rainbow's now living in the UK. Got someone from Saudi. Welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving up time. I guess for most of us, this is either going to be the middle or the end of the day, Sunday. So I'm always impressed when people take time on a Sunday to invest in their personal growth and relationships. That's just awesome. Even though there was a lot of chemistry, this is Bianca, even though a lot of chemistry, we're not compatible. So that is like a huge learning for most of us. And I had my own difficult path in learning this, where I couldn't quite compute that the chemistry was kind of overriding like the sobriety to actually see like, hey, we're not actually good for each other in this certain kind of way. So a big thing, compatibility and chemistry, you want enough of both, but just really realizing this chemistry does not dictate the compatibility. And once you kind of get that down, it's kind of easier sometimes to see a little bit more clearly. I am doing my best to teach you with honesty and not manipulation. And thank you for reflecting if you've experienced my vulnerability. I appreciate that. The ideal man these days, love My Little Pony. Just kidding. Good luck, bro. Okay, cool. Thanks. I mean, just to put that in, if I think I'm understanding that correctly, is it true that men today are having and are choosing and are able to embrace more of their feminine side? I think that is true. I think that is true. I also think that is a collective evolution. I think it's necessary and useful. And you get your choice, right? As a woman, you get your choice as to how much of that is of interest to you. You know, a lot of women that I work with, they kind of want an integrated man, right? They want a guy that can be in his masculine and has his mission and shows up and has spine and can lead and have initiative. And they also want a guy that can kind of connect with them emotionally and who's not afraid to be vulnerable and who has like an emotional capacity that, you know, 100 years ago, probably a lot of men that just wasn't needed in the way that life was constituted. So I actually see that net as a good development. Definitely going to mix it online with real life. Yeah, definitely mix online with real life. Are you homosexual? No, I'm not homosexual. I am a cisgender heterosexual married male. Jack, I love your videos, so informative and inspirational. What if you fall in love with an emotionally unavailable guy, clearly resonant but unable to resist the deep attachment style forces? Yeah, that's just hard. I mean, let's just name that straight off the gate. And probably a lot of people can relate to that. So one of the things you can try to do is to get support, right? So that could be professional support, like a therapist or a coach. It could be good friendship support. You probably want to put in place some substitute behaviors, right? So if you, I don't know, let's say you would typically text with someone in the evening, you might want to plan some things so that when you would normally be in that space, you actually got something else that you can constructively put your attention on. So sometimes there's just setting ourselves up smartly. Or if you're like, oh, I would normally text them, I'm actually going to text this best friend and I'm going to let them know that, hey, could you just be a bit more responsive in this time, or make a request for support, so that you're actually reorienting your attention and you're not sort of going down the rabbit hole. It's one of the reasons why no contact, like real no contact, can sometimes work, because you might have heard this. It's a slightly derogatory expression, but it says something like 99% is a bitch and 100% is a breeze. And what it means is doing something where you don't fully do it is sometimes a lot harder than actually just being like, no, I'm going to go no contact with this person and I'm going to reorient my energy somewhere else in my life. So that's part of it. And then sometimes partly realizing, like, if you just really see it clearly, like that this person isn't good for me, and every time I see them, I'm kind of wrecked or devastated or dysregulated, or they're just never going to be available. Like there's something, it's a bit like stopping smoking or something like that. Sometimes I think people just really wow, they just see it. Suddenly it pops and it's kind of like I see it clearly. And then, yeah, there may still be attraction, but it's sort of like, I just get that this isn't good for me. And there's something that kind of takes over, like a higher intelligence or your higher self kind of comes online to like be your protector. So part of that can just be about, you know, being more true to yourself and not allowing yourself the first little steps that kind of tiptoe you in the wrong direction. Sadly, paid for sites don't weed out time wasters. Yeah, I can imagine that's also true. Hey to Delaware, happy Sunday, thank you. Maybe you can start a discussion without me, okay, if you want to. Let's have a look here. Thank you for your loving advice. You're welcome. Hi to Pennsylvania. Great point on chemistry and compatibility. Yep, absolutely. Okay. This is a question. So he's been separated from his wife for 19 years and they're still living in the same house, have 2 kids, not filed for divorce. Is it wise to date him? So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that question. I think part of it is, so I'm going to talk in gross orienting generalization because I'm not really there with you, right? So I would say gross orienting generalization, there can be something powerful about taking a stand with a man and saying, hey, I would really like to be with you. And I notice there's some things that you need to figure out in your own life. And when you've done that, or you've made substantive progress on that, I'm really happy to hear from you. But I also don't want to kind of involve myself in a systems dynamic that isn't really going to serve me or us. So it's almost like I'm taking a stand for the possibility of a relationship with you, or just the possibility of a relationship with someone that is meaningful and that we can both step into fully. That's my stand. And he may not like that, because what you're really saying is I'm not willing to be in connection with you until you've resolved this situation, right? Which might mean, they've got to have separate housing or whatever would feel good and true to you in that situation. And guys sometimes don't like that because they actually want the connection with you, right? They're enjoying the connection with you. So you have to be willing to be disappointing to a guy in service of something that is stronger, deeper, more real. And not every guy is going to step up to that, but it's also kind of clarifying, right? Like if I'm a guy and I really want to be with you, I might have to figure a bunch of things out, and I might have to do that, and it might be hard. I might have to let some things go. I might have to disappoint some people. I might have to figure out making more money so that I can figure out my family situation. There's lots that could go into that. But I do think that the kind of energy that you fully kind of crystallize a relationship around is important. So I am a fan of people actually waiting and saying, you know what, let's wait to see if we can have the full enchilada possibility, than do this kind of half game, because I've seen a lot of half games not become a full game, right? So there's a thing where because if you think of that distinction, partner versus lover or companion, the guy isn't available to partner with you yet, right? So in a sense, you're saying, I'm willing to be your companion, or I'm willing to be your lover. And that the transition from companion and lover to partner isn't that common in my experience. So sometimes it's worth just taking a stand. Now, he may need a companion or want a companion in this stage. Like a lot of guys, if they are, kind of separated but not divorced, or recently out of something, or they're going through a huge transition in their own life, they want to have connection with a woman. It's just such a different thing than I'm available to partner you. And most guys, and again, I've been there historically, it's not like we can articulate that super clearly. You just might have to discern that from like, he's just stepped out of this really big thing. He might need some time to heal and find himself. So I might be willing to be a companion to him. But my main advice would be, don't be a companion if you have the expectation wrapped in it that one day he'll be your partner. You have to see that, I think, as a separate trajectory. And quite often, I'm just saying to you, in my experience, companions and lovers don't become full-time partners. And so you sort of get your sobriety to go into that, situation. Okay. So how do you know if a man is ready for something real, or if they just want hot and cold games? Also have a bit of anxious attachment, so it's hard to distinguish. Yeah, that's a great question. So oftentimes, if a guy is ready for something real, he's got a kind of sortedness in his own life, right? So there's a sort of sense that, particularly as a guy is really stepping into his kind of real man or true self, that he's not figuring a whole load of things out in his life. It's kind of like, yeah, maybe he's still got a lot to go with his career, but it's sort of on track, right? That he's not living out of his mum's basement, that there's kind of like a sense of he's got his own ground and he's kind of got his own back. There's a sort of like solidity in his masculine in some ways, that he's taking care of business, whatever that is, whether that's, a stardom career, or whether that's, he's doing something, whether he really loves it or not, that there's just like there's a kind of solidity there. Because in simplistic terms, if he's going to somewhat take care of you, not in a caretaking way, but just part of being in a relationship with a man is that he might take care of you in certain ways, he's got to have availability for that. And if he's got so much attention going on figuring out who he is and what life is and where his place in life is and where he can make a contribution and how he can figure out making money, if all of those things aren't really somewhat sorted, I think it's hard for most guys to be like, oh yeah, the most obvious thing is I want to step into a serious relationship with someone. Or if they're doing that, you might question, why are they doing that? It could be that they're stepping into that relationship as a kind of a substitute for figuring out their own life in some ways. Now, again, I'm talking in gross orienting generalization. There might be plenty of exceptions to this, but it is one thing to pay attention to, is what has a guy got figured out in his own life? Now, do they want to play hot and cold games? I want to distinguish something in here. So yes, there are a bunch of dudes that are probably happy to be playing games. I also think there are probably more people where it's like the playing of the game is just the consequence really of how they are connecting with you, right? That it's not actually a sinister thing necessarily. It's just, we don't have the kind of connection that runs consistently warm and hot. It's like there's a cold and hotness in our connection. And it's good to just see that for what it is. Again, hot and cold connections don't generally, in my experience, stabilize out as partnerships. So you kind of get to have your choice with that. You might look, is there anything that you're doing that contributes to a hot and cold dynamic, right? But also just for most of us to really make a relationship work, it's not easy, right? We're all quirky. We all have our hangups. We all have our wounds. We all have our frailties and vulnerabilities. We're going to have to do some work together. And this hot and cold dynamic doesn't make it easy for most people to do work together. There's got to be some minimum effective dose of coming back together or wanting to connect or mutually wanting to connect. That for most of us, that is a necessary prerequisite for a long-term relationship to stabilize. So don't be afraid of saying no to hot and cold connections. But notice if you generally have hot and cold connections ongoingly, there may be something that is part of that. Okay, I have a question from Grace. Why do you think some men won't make eye contact? I've come across this with someone I've known for a few years. My imagination is that when someone doesn't hold eye contact is that they are feeling self-conscious or shy or anxious in some way. If someone's doing that ongoingly, that's curious to me, because normally for those people that have that, probably after a while, there's a sense of, hey, we're getting to know each other, and maybe it's more easy for me to stay in connection with you. I'm curious kind of what's coming up for you around this. So if someone doesn't make eye contact with you, is there something that comes up for you? Or how is this related to you getting what you want from your dating? And it may be, I just would like to make a connection. Sandy, morning from Melbourne. Yay to Melbourne. Have not been to Australia, but it might happen in the next year. Haley, Regina, great to see you live. Hey, thanks for being here live. Can you define what qualifies as a real relationship? That's a great question. And, in some ways, so my little caveat is that this is probably an essentially contested concept, which means that there's no one definition universally that's going to be agreed upon. So probably what I'm giving you is a Jack take on what is a real relationship. So that's my caveat. When I say real relationship, I mean something that both people would define as we are in a relationship, number one, right? So whether that's like, hey, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend, or hey, we're partners, or hey, we're dating with a view to that. There's some sense of we're both honoring that that is what is happening here and that's what we want, right? I've had some people define as relationship and it's like, you haven't really spent any time together, or you're really into the guy, but the guy doesn't really make time to see you. So it doesn't really feel like there's some minimum effective dose of equality, parity. We both want to see each other, mutuality, whatever you want to call that. Enough of this that's happening, right? We both want to spend time together. We both want to be around each other. We both want to connect. There's got to be something like that happening, I think, for it to be defined as a relationship. Again, I'm not saying a relationship needs to be long-term necessarily, or that it needs to be, a marriage or anything like that. just saying that there's both of us kind of orienting to it. Now, in today's world, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be exclusive, although most of the people that I work with actually do want to have an exclusive relationship with someone. If you've been with someone for 3 years and they still won't call you their girlfriend or something like that, that's probably a red flag, right? So for most of you here, what a real relationship is something that is heading in a direction of more, not less commitment, right? Of more, not less investment. There's like a relationship that's actually kind of growing in some way. And then there's another aspect of it, like the realness. Obviously a lot of my work is around trying to be real, helping people to be real, helping people to really discuss and be with what's actually coming up in relationship. So that's another way you could talk about real relationship, is we are rooted in the real. We care about what is actually going on. We care about each other's experience. We care about deepening and bringing our heart and our soul into a connection. So there's that sort of like a kind of an even narrower definition of what is a real relationship. Unavailability makes you work on yourself. I'm now so aware. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be absolutely a portal to better things. Even though I'm in another life situation, married and kids, I always learn something new from you. Thank you very much. The fear of rejection is connected with my own rejecting of other people. Cool. Yes, there's, I've even thought about doing a specific course on this. So I've talked a lot on this live stream about frustration, and how frustration can be like a dominant experience. Another dominant experience that people can have is rejection, and you can be either end of that, right? Either I'm feeling rejected, or if I'm being honest, I am rejecting myself or other people. And that can be a really good thing to bring to your inner work. That can be a really good thing to inquire into, because if you are rejecting yourself and you're rejecting parts of your experience, it's a real barrier to doing deeper inner work, right? If you're having an experience that you're like, nope, can't really accept that that's what's happening. Said differently, if you are rejecting yourself and your experience, you can't really fully accept and love yourself, right? It's kind of that important. And if you easily feel rejected by other people, right, you can kind of run a racket on other people, like, why do they reject me so much? And it could be that you're just really sensitive, and that's fine. I can relate to that. And you might just want to notice, like, is there a way that I tend to see life sort of in the background? There's this kind of paradigm, like rejectee, rejector. And that is kind of like my experience of life, that at any moment, someone might reject me or I might reject them. Generally, if you feel rejected, right, you feel like you're the weaker person. So the person that gets rejected tends to be weak, pure, innocent, nice, friendly, something like this. And the person that rejects tends to be strong, cruel, unkind. And that this is kind of like a way that you orient to reality. You either, if you often feel rejected, you feel that other people have the power. Now, in your past, it may have been true because, when you're a child, your parent, there's an asymmetrical power relationship. And you may have been this innocent, pure kid who was actually, in all objectivity, being rejected over and over again by a parent. That is absolutely possible. And if that happened, sorry, that's really crappy. And now in your adult, your work is going to be, well, okay, that all being said, what do I need to do and work on and heal so that I'm not showing up all the time with this fear of rejection or this actual, the other piece that comes up for people, and I sometimes pop in coaching relationships with people, is what we call preemptive, or I call preemptive rejection, which is I fear you're going to reject me. And so just before that, I actually push you away. Oh, I didn't want it to work out with him. He wasn't my guy anyway. Yeah, he was kind of stupid. That was nothing, right? So I kind of minimize, reject, all of which is, protection mechanisms. And I'm not here to say that every protection mechanism is a bad thing, because often protection is kind of what we need to stay safe, but it will be a barrier to a more real kind of relationship. So for those of you that really want to do the deeper work, that can be the way into this. Is there a future if someone smokes a lot of pot? That's a good question. Here I am in Colorado, obviously with pot being legalized, pretty much one of the first places in the world. So there's a few ways into this. One is, if you want to have a relationship with this person, and this is like a question mark for you, how much can they receive your influence, right? So if this is like, wow, this is a real problem. If I want to be in relationship with you and I realize that my pot smoking is a problem, I want to come to the table to find a better way to do that, right? Doesn't mean I have to give it up. Doesn't mean I have to agree with you, but there might be some minimal effective dose, I keep using that phrase, but minimum effective dose that I'm going to receive your influence. Now, if I'm addicted to a substance, that's going to be really hard. And if people are addicted, sometimes maybe the loving thing to do is to actually say, hey, I want to be in a relationship with you, but I can't really do that while you're addicted. I might be willing to support you as a friend or companion, but actually I don't think we should be in a full-time partnership with that going on. I'm also curious about, what's around this, because sometimes smoking a lot of pot is a proxy for I'm not really living my life, right? I'm kind of numbing out, or I'm dissociated, or I'm kind of avoiding my life. And if that is happening, yeah, I think that could be really difficult to be in relationship with, because it would interfere probably with my ability to really be in my real man, right? Or whomever it is that you're relating with. So that's probably how I would go into that. Definitely it would be a question and concern for me. And sometimes in this territory, it's hard, and it's not like I've had to deal with this really a little bit, but not really personally. Sometimes the loving thing is to say, hey, I love you, but just because I love you doesn't mean I'm going to be in a relationship with you, right? And to really see that distinction, like lots of people you can love and you can hold dearly in your heart and want the highest for their unfoldment. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be in some kind of relationship with you, because that wouldn't necessarily serve me, right? Like if you don't really know who you're talking to sometimes, or whether they can really take care of responsibilities with you in a relationship, that could be really difficult. Is this red pill dating for women? No, this is not red pill dating for women. Good to see you too. Too bad I can't see your faces. Yeah, at some point I will probably be launching a live group program. So if you want to be in a smaller group live with me, kind of keep your ears pricked, because I will be releasing information on that in the coming weeks. Best relationships are built off a good friendship. I think there's some truth to that. I definitely think you need to have some of that, being good friends to each other, looking out for each other in that way. It can be difficult if you've constellated a relationship for a long time around friendship. If there's to then move that into the kind of romantic sexual partnership realm, sometimes that can be difficult for people. It's more about, has that potential always been there? Sometimes it's been there, but you haven't explored it because structurally you couldn't, right? Like maybe someone was in a relationship, or maybe you were just not in a time of your life where you could step into something. So, do you think a man should pay for the first date? And if he doesn't pay but is still interested, what do you think about it? So I don't try and have too many sort of specific rules about things like this, because there's so much kind of diversity and nuance in the world. If a guy never has the ability to pay for a date, I think that's going to be a problem. If he never shows up to pay for a date, I think that can be a problem. Whether it's the first date, I'm not hard and fast about that. But that's also because, there are a lot of relationship coaches who deal a lot in the realm, in that sort of more tactical realm. It's not really my gift in some ways. My gift is a little bit in the bigger picture in terms of, dynamics, attachment, emotional connection, kind of. So I try not to get too stuck on the granularity. Just to say to you, one of the ways that I orient to life in my own kind of practice is I try and have as few beliefs as possible. So I try and not have a belief, oh, this has to go a certain way, because it tends to keep me bumping up against reality. Or reality, hit my T's. So if a guy never pays for a date, I would just ask him about it, kind of what I notice you never pay for a date. I'm curious about that. I'm trying to come from curiosity, not judgment, or that, oh, I had an expectation and now that expectation wasn't met and now I'm feeling bad about that. It's kind of like, drop that expectation. You can just let him know that you really like it when he does pay for something, and if ongoingly he's not going to be in a relationship dynamic with you where he has that kind of ability to like take you on a date, and that's important enough to you, great. He's probably not your guy in a certain way. But there are so many cultural expectations of this right now that a lot of us are out of a more traditional paradigm and we're in a more modernist or postmodernist paradigm. Those rules of dating, they're not really so set, I don't think, as they probably were in the past. So I think notice more about what is in the connection, what's true here, and what would be authentic for you. You can't really control whether a guy pays for a date, right? But what you can do is notice what's coming up for me and reveal it if you can, or bring it into the conversation, or, like not have to sit on it, because how he deals with that will also let you know kind of how is he, how is he receiving feedback, or how is he when you bring something to him or whatever, particularly if you actually are developing a deeper connection. Feminism killed chivalry. I don't know about that. That seems like a complex question. Any tips for putting the focus back onto yourself when you've been distracted by unavailable men? That's a great question. So, part of that I think is really cultivating yourself, right? Cultivating your authentic and real self. How do you do that? Well, you notice, what are your authentic desires? What are the things you really authentically want? Not just kind of like, maybe you want to eat chocolate right now. That might be true, right? And sometimes just even learning to be like, yeah, I want to eat chocolate right now, and I'm going to fulfill on that desire. That can actually be developmental to some people if they don't tend to act on their desires. But really, like at a kind of soul, heart, deeper level, what do I want? Maybe you want to bring in some new hobbies. Maybe you want to bring in some new friendships. Maybe you want to feel more expressed in your work. And how can you actually put the focus on you enough? Those things are important to you, and you're going to practice them. And maybe you're going to say no to some friendships for some evenings because you want to really cultivate yourself and get to know yourself. So part of it, I think, is what you invite into your life. Part of it is how present are you to yourself? If you really love yourself and are present to yourself and attend to yourself, there's a way that you just get to know yourself more. And there's a way that you just get to value yourself more because you're actually present here. You're not just out here in the world with other people. There's a time and a place for that. But you're actually bringing that attention into yourself and getting to know yourself and befriending yourself and noticing where the edges of your ability to stay with yourself are. Maybe when you're happy and in a good mood, you can hang out with yourself. But maybe if you're depressed and melancholic, you can't be with yourself. And you just have to start to learn, like, wow, for me to be a really good friend on myself, I have to learn to be with myself in more situations. So that's something you can do. You can practice the 80-20 rule that you might have heard me talk about in other videos, where when you're with someone, you're going to keep 80% of the attention on yourself, right? For any of us that are more other-centered, other-focused, it's not a problem. It's just something you can practice so that you can increase your range. Maybe you actually go for a period of time where you don't date men. And you just put 100% of your attention into your own life. For most of us, that can be really powerful, to have a period of time where I'm really not going to be in the distraction of the dating game in some ways. I'm going to be really just in my life, building roots, connecting to my purpose, being with my heart, being with my authentic desire, and kind of having a more solid foundation under you so that when an unavailable man comes along, you're not going to lose your foundation. You're going to be more sober and say, hey, I'm attracted to this guy. Maybe I'm super, super, super attracted to this guy, and I notice that he's not really available. So I've got good roots in my own life. I can actually walk away from that situation. Gentlemen are an endangered species. You are. Hi, Maria. Thank you, Jack, for your loving advice. Big brother, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. Just trying to find the questions in here. We are not taught to be ourselves. What a challenge that is. I've been in a long-term relationship where I was told you have to earn love and being self is not lovable. How do we transform this? Yeah, so probably, again, people can relate to that. That's really tough if you've had a situation where you really felt like you had to earn love. I'll just put the sort of like paint an ultimate picture of this. Ultimately, where this could go for you, which I think would be helpful, is when you don't have to earn love from yourself for yourself. Right? Most of us, if we're not careful, we have an orientation to ourselves like, I love myself because I achieved, or I love myself because I felt valuable. I love myself because I'm competent. I love myself because I'm kind. Right? There's a condition, there's a contingency at the core of the question of how do I love myself? And for most of us, it takes practice to get into the orientation of I love myself, period. I love myself, period. I don't love myself contingently because, right? I love myself because I'm me. I'm here. I'm incarnated. I'm a real person. I'm a human. I'm doing my best. I live my life. I'm present to myself. It's like I love my own authenticity. I don't try and be someone else. So the more that happens, that you don't have to earn love on yourself, the less likely it is that you're going to be susceptible to a guy who thinks you really have to earn love. Right? You see, there's almost like there's nowhere for it to land. right? Whereas if you are earning love with yourself all the time, you're very open to the kind of virus, if you will, from someone else of being like, yeah, I can teach you that you have to earn my love. I can play into that game with you. And he may sometimes play into that game even though he doesn't want to. It could be a completely unconscious pattern, right? And it could be that 80% of that pattern could actually be on your side of the fence. We don't know. And that when you clear that up, you're just no longer a breeding ground for that kind of orientation. That's where I would go with that. I believe women should have to wear what they want. Yeah, I'm generally a fan of people wearing what they want. I'm also a fan of people not feeling like they have to do that if that's not true to them. I'm more a fan of like, well, what's your true expression? And then let's go with that and be with each other in that. When is it a good time to introduce friends and or children? So I think one of the advantages of introducing friends when you're dating someone is that you just get more reflection. And particularly in any situation where you might be at risk of a bit of a runaway imagination, right? If you're like really falling hard for someone, or you're really sort of fantasizing about the future and what this could be, or, you know, he's the one, and you're kind of really falling in love and there's lots of chemistry running, I think getting a reality check from friends can be really important, right? And also it just lets you see another side of someone, right? Because there's connecting when we're together and there's connecting when we're with people. And sometimes those things are different, and that's totally fine that they're different. It's just worth having that, I think, as part of the inclusion. I also think it goes the other way, right? That you want to be introduced to someone else's circle and friends to see what they're like, to really get a good handle on their life. Now, the question of children, I think that probably it's great to bring the fact that you have children into the conversation as early as possible, just so you guys are kind of aligned and being real with each other, because there are plenty of men that want to be in that role or want to step into that love that. And there's some guys that's just not their bag. And it's better, I think, just to establish that off the bat as early as possible. I don't really have a sense of like a specific 3, 6, 9 month or something like that timeline. I think it's more in the context of where the relationship's going, right? And how committed the relationship is. You know, I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to preach about parenting. You know, my sense is that kids benefit from consistency. So you probably want to be at a stage in the relationship where you actually are feeling really consistent with each other before you do that. That would be one perspective on that question. Do Brits and Americans have different views on dating? Are you dating multiple people at the same time? I don't know if I'm the authority on that. I'm most interested to kind of generalize that question in some ways and say, I don't think there are defined standards of dating, period. Right? You know, the dating in New York versus California versus Oslo versus wherever, there are different norms. There are different norms in terms of people's worldviews. So all of that to say, if we're in somewhat agreement that there are no defined standards of dating, then really the game becomes, how can I make as few assumptions as possible about this, right? How can I carry as few expectations and as few assumptions into the dating process, so then I don't have my expectations missed. I don't think of things happening that's not. I question, you know, hey, we've hung out for 5 times now and I really like you. Like, would you be interested in having a relationship, you know? Or greenlighting a guy and just letting him know, hey, I really like you. Curious where I stand, or whatever it is. I'm more of a fan of moving us in that direction, even if at times it can feel a bit like we're making explicit something that can be fun when it's held implicitly. But I see a lot of the consequences of implicit assumptions damaging relationships and just damaging people and getting really hurt because you thought it was going a certain direction and it actually really isn't going that direction. And also because there are certain combinations in dating that it takes a while for the real truth to metabolize out. So there are certain dating combinations where it can be on quickly and be like, wow, this is it. Like, this could be amazing. We could be big things together in the world, or we really get each other. But actually a lot of that is a projection. And really when you get under it, it's like, oh, we actually aren't available for that. Or a lot of it was my attachment style getting activated and I just wanted to be really close to you. So I'm definitely, wherever you're from, a fan of really slowing it down. And if being exclusive is important to you, I definitely bring that into the conversation at the right time. I wouldn't prematurely bring it into the conversation in a certain way, because I have seen where people's anxious attachment wants them to have exclusivity, but it's like, you actually really don't know this guy. So you don't really want to attach to him yet, right? You actually want to date him. So there can be a real use in again, this kind of slow it down mantra. I'm also from the South, gentleman also pays. Yeah, great. I mean, part of that is like a cultural context, right? And a lot of us aren't necessarily swimming in a specific clear cultural context, maybe in the way that we weren't. Is there a certain balance between being vulnerable and being mysterious? I'm sure there is. Yeah, and it might be that your own experiments and inquiries enlighten that. I'm a fan of vulnerability as filter, right? That at a certain point you are being more vulnerable and revealing you, because if you can risk that fear that it doesn't work out or rejection, you actually get to clear read on, is he someone that can be with my vulnerability? And I think that's really important for most of you. You obviously have to be careful that you're not being vulnerable with the wrong guy, right? Which brings us right back to can you intuit that this is a guy that you actually want to connect with? Can you intuit this is someone that you might be able to feel safe to? The other thing I'd say about being mysterious is I wouldn't deploy it too much as a conscious strategy, like I'm trying to be mysterious. I would sort of be in right relationship with your essential mystery. So like, for some people, yeah, we are kind of more complicated than other people, or we are sort of, less of an obvious package in certain ways. And that's cool. Like, be true to that. If you start to use mystery too much as a game to kind of hook a guy's attention, I would be wary of that, because it might stop some of the real you coming through in a certain way. Anya, hey, thanks for being here. Happy premature birthday to you. You may have seen... Some of you may have seen, I did a segment on one of Anya's summits recently, which was really awesome. So thanks for that, Anya. What if the man says, I can't promise you anything? What does he mean by that? What he means by that probabilistically is he's not going to be available for an ongoing connection. Or he's not going to be available certainly for an ongoing partnership, might be a truer way of saying that. So I would listen to a guy when he says... Well, I listen to a guy when he says that, right? It can be easy to overlook these little things that get dropped at the beginning of dating because you're kind of really curious about what could happen. When a guy says, I can't promise you anything, here's how I would think about that if I were trying to support you. He's not available for partnership. He might be available for companionship. He might be available for lovership, right? And by lovership, I mean something that is mostly romantic and sexual, but doesn't have the consistency of a partnership. It doesn't have the mutuality and obligations of a partnership. And so if that's true, what is true for you, right? Like, are you available for a lovership or a companionship with him? And if you're not, that is your time to take a stand and say, hey, thank you for letting me know you can't promise me anything. I'm actually really wanting to have a guy that can promise me something. So, it's been a great date and let's stay connected, but I'm not going to pursue this with you. That would probably be honoring your boundaries. Societal norms are nebulous now. That makes communications of values and expectations between serious partners more important, right? I think that is true. One of the things I will say about values is I talk about conscious values and unconscious values. So my conscious values are the ones that I can communicate to you and say, yeah, I value connection. I value health. I value sustainability. I value whatever it is. Then there's these unconscious values, which are, well, what are the things that get your attention? Right? Now, one way of thinking about that, for those of you that are aware of it, is, you might know I work a lot with the three instincts, right? The social instinct, the self-preservation instinct, and the sexual instinct. And that's part of the Enneagram world, for those of you that know that. And why I'm bringing that in is that often those things will be more determinative of people's attention than necessarily the conscious values that they articulate to you. So you can sometimes have the experience of like, oh, he values health. I value health. He values movies. I value movies. He values making money. I value making money. He values entrepreneurship. I value entrepreneurship, or whatever those things are. And you might be a little bit confused because there are these other things that actually govern a lot of what you think is important and what you tend to get tight and contracted and preoccupied by, which are things like your actual instinctual values, which to most of us, until we distinguish them, they're unconscious, right? They're just kind of programs running in the background. So just to bring that in to say, sometimes people can kind of get off a little bit on like, wow, we're so values aligned. Now, whether that means that at an end of a long night, you're both going to have the same value on, should we tidy the house or should we go to bed? Or do we work first and do we play later? Or is it more important to be part of our, get out and see our community? Or is it more important that we are focused on each other? Or is it, how important is it to put money away first, or to value that side of things? Like there's a lot of difference there, that when it comes to being in a real world partnership with someone, those differences are important. Not to say that you have to be completely aligned. They're often a really beautiful place to work with someone. But what I don't want is that there's some unconscious thing that is sabotaging your relationships that you're not even aware of. So another way of saying that would be to say, yes, have a conversation about values and expectations, and then also pay really good attention to where your and their attention go, and where those attention patterns may be different. Does the woman always have to work? Does the woman always have to work? No, the woman doesn't always have to work. Does the woman always have to wait for the guy to ask him out? I don't think so. I don't think so. Again, from this perspective of as few rules as possible, sometimes guys aren't good at that piece, right? And they might be a really good guy to be in relationship with, but they're just a little shy and timid around that initial contact, and they need a green light. And you just letting them know, hey, I'd love to get to know you more, or hey, I'd love for you to take me on a date. That can sometimes be a threshold moment that a guy's like, oh, okay, you're into me. This is cool. And actually, I do want to pursue you. I'm interested. So again, I'm a pragmatist. What works? If you're waiting and there's a guy if you're waiting and there's a guy you like and he never asks you out, how is that serving you? Because you might just be allowing him to occupy a kind of energy space in your life that is actually limiting your other dating, right? Lots of times I get contact from women who say, hey, I'm basically kind of have a big crush / I'm in love with a guy that I work with, and I think he feels it, but I don't know, and we've never talked about it. And I get that can be really difficult, and you might have to find out, hey, your man crush is not having a crush back on you. I'm just a fan of, like, let's get in there, because we don't want you wasting another 12 months of your life on an unrequited love interest, right? That's sort of the bottom line with this. So now, if you say to a guy, hey, I'm interested in you, ask me on a date, and he kind of never does, or you book a first date and he never books a follow-up date, he never initiates with you, you might need to be in discernment. Is that going to be a guy that works for you? Because most of you probably want a guy that has some ability to take initiative or to take you on a date. But I don't think that necessarily he has to throw that first ball. That's just pragmatism. How do you know if a man's behavior is a phase of growing or his underlying personality? He's had a hard couple of years and is non-committal in more aspects than just our relationship. Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And there might be a lot of nuance in that territory. So the distinction I made earlier, if you were here, between companion, lover, and partner, speaking in gross orienting generalization, men are available for different things at different stages of their development. So if a guy has, quote, had a hard couple of years, he may not be available for partnership. Excuse me. So you may have to realize that he's not available for partnership. Am I available to hang around to find out in the long term, is he available for partnership? And I'm going to just say again, in gross orienting generalization, if you really want partnership, I would take a stand for it. And I would take a stand and say, hey, I'm going to give you some time to figure your stuff out, but I'm going to go live my life. I'm not waiting for you. But I'm receptive if you want to call me at some point and let me know that you've kind of figured things out, or you're in a phase where you do feel available for a relationship. Because that way you really honor yourself. You're not trying to make him into something that he's not. And you're right. When a guy is non-committal in many aspects of his life, it's not really normally true for him to be committed in relationship. I know that from difficult personal experience. So you do want to align with where a guy is at. Just scrolling here. Sorry if I missed your question. It's a little difficult to kind of do this and make sure I reach everything. You're really welcome to, if you've asked a question that I don't end up answering, just post it under another video, because then that will show up in my notifications. Should I be backpedaling to get to the level or stage of relationship? Looks like I've skipped steps as the talk seems sequential. Should I be backpedaling to get to the level or stage of relationship? You're going to have to remind me, Linda. I'm not quite following that question. My boyfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. I feel I have to initiate contact most of the time, and I've even went as far as not reached out to him to see if he would initiate, but he doesn't. Now, that's a good one. I would encourage you to take a stand there, probably. and to maybe let him know that you want a relationship with a minimum amount of initiation from a guy, and that he's not offering you that, just so he's clear that that is really a thing for you, because he may or may not be super in tune with that. And I think that could be a very valid deal breaker, because that's really it's a kind of like a foundational energy. If he's never initiating with you, he's probably not going to just suddenly start initiating 2 years down the line. And generally, it doesn't make for the greatest polarity and chemistry in a way. It's like the tendency that you can then start to be more in your masculine, you're more in the initiating. And again, I don't hold completely hard and fast rules about a relationship could really work with the woman being more the initiator. You just have to be clear that that's what you want. Some women are really happy with that. They're like, yeah, cool, I actually like that. I know I'm in that role a lot, and I actually want a guy that's a bit more low key and doesn't initiate. That's fine. But I think if you're asking this question, you probably don't want that. And if you let him know, I wouldn't just go no contact to try and play some game. I would actually just say, look, there's something I'm really struggling with, and this could be a deal breaker, and I want to talk to you about this. And you could give him a practice opportunity, like, hey, now you know this, that this is kind of a deal breaker territory for me. Give him a month, see what happens, and be willing to take a stand for you, because my imagination is there's probably a guy out there that would really like to initiate with you more. That's probably true. What do you think about rules in relationships? Don't lie, don't cheat, and don't make promises you can't keep. I'm quite a fan of people coming to a shared reality. And most of us come to a shared reality through conversations that matter. So I'm a fan of people sitting down and having those conversations. I also know from personal experience, sometimes those conversations aren't that easy. It's not just like a one and done. Getting clear about how an agreement we have, how that actually gets translated into lived reality. If we've got different perspectives on it, for example, that can be a work in progress. So I think anytime that you're trying to say, hey, let's get on the same page, let's cultivate a shared reality, let's create enough of a shared reality that can include sometimes different realities. Let's be transparent about our agreements. Absolutely. I don't think that there's too much downside to that. The one thing I have occasionally seen is some people can kind of get off on agreements and sort of miss the bigger picture of, like, are we really trying to do like a shared partnership life together? Because if we are trying to do that and we both equally want that, there's a whole set of things that may be really tricky and tough and take a long time to work out. But it's like we've kind of got the orientation together, the desire, the stability together to work it out. Whereas sometimes people can use these sort of convoluted agreements. And when I look at it, I'm like, really what this means is this guy is not in a committed relationship with you. He's in a committed agreement with you, right? Like you're having this set of agreements. So you're like, oh, we can't say this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can see other people in this situation, but not that. And sometimes it can just be a whole lot of noise when underlying it's like, he's not your partner yet and you want a partner. So why are you relating with him? So that's just something I've seen come up in that territory. Is it likely to be more of a guy says he wants to be friends? Oh, our masterclass is still on Anya's YouTube channel. I left it up because it was my favorite. Well, that's cool. Thanks. I might try and point people to that sometime. What do you say about a guy who's afraid of commitment, but I was dating him for a year? Okay, great question. Super relevant to a lot of people, I'm sure. I'm going to say one thing, which is probably true of most, if not nearly all men, is that probably nearly all men are actually afraid of commitment, right? That it actually takes something for a guy to be like, yeah, I'm gonna commit to this, right? Like a lot of men in their core, the essence of the masculine is a lot about freedom. And certainly in the immature masculine, there's a way that commitment doesn't sit well with freedom, right? It's all like, oh my God, I've lost all my freedom in making this commitment. I think in the more integrated, mature masculine, you sort of get that you actually have some of your freedom through your commitments, and those things can kind of coexist and integrate more easily. But I just want to say that because I'm not going to make guys wrong that they're afraid of committing in a certain way, right? Like, do you actually want them to take that seriously? You want them to sit with their heart and be with that and really notice what's true for them and take time and get reflection from their friends or their family or whatever to come to a stage where they might be more committed. So a lot of guys are in that. And I'm also a fan of the sort of, again, it's a bit of a generalization, like, don't wait too long to get to commitment, but don't be too premature, right? We want some sobriety, which is sort of somewhere in the middle for most of us. So if you've been with a guy for a year and he's afraid of committing. I'm curious if by committing you mean like make me your girlfriend, or you mean something like make me your wife. I'd be curious where he's at in his own masculine development, right? How much is he fully kind of in his masculine, and how much is he available to commit? Because if he's got too much going on in his life, he might not be at a stage where actually making a commitment would be a good thing for either of you. So I think that needs to be included. And then I'd be curious if you could tease out like, well, so where is he in relationship to making a commitment? You know, does he want another 6 months? And you might be like, cool, you can have another 6 months, and then we kind of need to really get clear on this, you know? Or is it like a series of conversations that might need to unfold? Or is there some piece that if he, you know, qualified as accountant or did something with his work or something that's actually going to like structurally allow him to feel better about making a commitment? It's difficult territory, and a lot of people are in that situation, right? Where you're kind of like, I love this guy, I kind of want to be with him. We've got some data, we've been together for a while. I think also you can look at how committed he is into other areas of his life, because if he's not really holding down other commitments, he's probably not going to want to hold down one with you. I wouldn't be afraid of bringing it up, but I would really encourage you to do this. If you bring it up, I would encourage you to do it from your most receptive, centered, non-expectation place. Because this is a difficult conversation. And sometimes because you have probably your own fear around him not committing, sometimes that can kind of cloud that conversation, right? And he ends up feeling like, wow, he's got to say that he's going to commit to you or else. So you want it, it's subtle, right? You don't really want it to be like an ultimatum, but you do want it to be a long-term, like, you're clear where I stand with this and that this could be a deal breaker for me. But you don't want it to be a sort of in the moment, he's feeling like pressured that he's got to say something or not. Because what you really want is his truth, right? A man wants to commit to you, not because you want him to commit to you, because he wants to commit to you. That's really what you want, right? You want him to come to that somewhat on his own. Now, you may lay down a little bit of scaffolding to help him decide if he wants to commit to you. That's okay. You can do that. But do you get that this can so easily become a source of kind of tension and frustration and fight in the relationship, when there may be a better time and place for you to really address that with him. Most guys, I think, if they're going to have this sort of conversation with you, most guys would benefit from forewarning, right? So it's not the thing you want to bring up when you guys are already in some kind of disrepair, or you know, you're in a difficult spot and it just sort of comes out. You kind of want to have this as like, hey, at some point in the next week or month, I would love to have a conversation with you just about kind of where we're at, and just to see whether we're on the same page or not, something like that. And then if that conversation hasn't been initiated by him, or you can kind of loop back and say, hey, I'd love to have that conversation. Is there some time that would work for you? So you can kind of massage it, but I don't think you want to be in a situation where you're kind of pressuring him and then you don't get the truth, or he feels pressured into something and then that ultimately isn't the truth. Is it okay to date 3 months post breakup, even though it still feels too soon for physical? Do you mean, is it okay for you to date 3 months after a breakup, or for him to date 3 months after a breakup? I actually think it can be quite healing to date after a breakup. I just think you might want to distinguish dating from kind of getting into something. I think most people will benefit from a period of time to really heal, close, complete with the past. And you don't want to sort of disrupt that cycle too much. But one of the things that does allow people to move forward is sort of like, oh, there's actually, you know, there's some possibility and aliveness kind of in the field. And you don't want to be the rebound date, but you also don't want to sort of wait too long to get out there. And I just sort of honor what's true, right? Like I could imagine that you could go on a date and sort of say to someone like, you know, I'm actually, there's different realities around dating. In the authentic reality around dating, you could say to someone in the early stages of dating, like, yeah, I'm actually 3 months out of a breakup and I'm still finding myself a little bit, and that might be fine. In some realities, it's not so easy just to sort of name what's real and true, but that's also a good kind of inclination. Where are we? Could we do one just on the Enneagram? Yeah, we could. If there's enough of us Enneagram geeks out there, absolutely. I'll maybe poll that sometime and find out. Anesa, hi. Clayton Olson Coaching, Jackie Boy. Hi, Clayton. How you doing, buddy? Thanks for being here. I get that it's late if you're in Europe, so thanks to those of you that have stayed with us this far. Any of you that have said thanks for your help, you're welcome. Would you say you should never get in a relationship with someone who has problems like depression and alcoholism? I believe never, and yet sometimes I feel like love could change it. Oh gosh, that's such a good question. Again, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Okay, so in that exploration, on the one hand, I'd want to be balancing having as few rules as possible, right? Because love does sometimes have its own kind of mystery and answers. I wouldn't want to be loving someone into changing. I think that's I'd be really cautious about that. I think that can be a bit of a dangerous orientation, because it's basically saying, when you simplify it, that they need to change in order for the relationship to work. And if you're like, well, yeah, they're in an addiction, of course they need to change. I would be more of a fan of you being loving towards them as a companion than I would actually as a partner, like as a really good friend to them. And if you have too many feelings and you actually just want to be with them as a partner, that you can't do that, maybe you can find someone, maybe you can help them find that kind of support elsewhere. But I think if you're going in with a view of, I need to date the future, right? I need to date the potential. I need this to change in order that we could have a relationship. I'm curious why you would be kind of getting into that off the bat. And it might be that there's some exploration for you around, being the healer or loving the wounded or the bird with the broken wing, so to speak. Sometimes there's that one within us that kind of loves on people that really need our help and love. And that might just be a different thing than you're going to be a great partner to me. You can still be a huge humanitarian, right? You could go out and help tons of people with addiction if you wanted to, if that was enough of a calling for you. But you might just want to distinguish that might not be a good place for you to put your flag and make your base and have as a long-term partner. Or you might say, I'm going to hold the line, and yeah, that person comes back into my life and they've got, enough sobriety under their belt that you can kind of believe they've made a change and turned a corner. That's a different situation. But I don't think you should kind of take it on that they need to change. Or you'd have to be like, they might always be addicted and I'm happy to be in a relationship with them. I take them as they are. Do you feel like online dating is a good place? So I did say some stuff earlier in the conversation about that. So if you weren't here, I'd encourage you to go back to it. I feel for online dating. I don't think that online dating is necessarily the easiest terrain, because I think there are all sorts of impulses that when we're in our kind of click, swipe brain, that we sort of bring to online dating, which might not be that sort of soulful, heartfelt connection that most of us are looking for. I would just see online kind of like, and again, this might be me and my business brain a little bit, but it's kind of like lead generation, right? It's kind of like a new prospect that I then want to actually figure out, get together with them, and then see if there's something real. So it's just a way of increasing the number of people that could come into your circle. I don't think it's a very profound way to make a connection. And that connection, I think, needs to happen in real time. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person. It could be like this. It could be on a call. But I don't think there's any substitute for having that kind of real-time connection with people. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy my grounded approach, and you're welcome. I'm happy that this is helpful to people. I love that I get to share and teach and relate. Lauren, thanks for your feedback too. I appreciate that. How do you deal with unresolved feelings for someone while moving forward with a life when the person doesn't want to communicate? God, another good territory. I thank you for naming these things. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to these things. So I think the way you deal with unresolved feelings is turning towards it, not away from it, right? I think there could be a strategy we might want to deploy that's sort of like a distracting ourselves. I would probably be more of a fan of turning inwards to it and getting some support, whether that's from a friend or a therapist or a therapist friend called a friend or a coach, to actually get someone to hold space and to say, hey, there's something in my life called I have unresolved feelings for this person. And that's kind of like a big deal, right? That could be a real barrier to your life in terms of your fulfillment, in terms of having the space to allow someone else to step into. So I'm kind of encouraging you to take it seriously and to sort of put it on the map in terms of, this is something I'm going to put some energy and attention and maybe get some support around. Often you can support that with a process, right? Because you might basically need to go through a grieving process. You might need to grieve the person or grieve the potential that didn't get actualized. And you might want to do that formally, right? Like have a bunch of people around and witness you as you let something go, or you throw stones in the river, or throw old pictures of you into the fire, or there's a lot of ritualistic ways that you could go about it. It's about really acknowledging and facing, like, I've got to let this person go and I really want to do that. And not getting off on the feelings of unresolution. That can sometimes be a barrier, right? People are really high or stuck on the feeling of the unresolution, the feeling of unrequitedness, the feeling of the longing of the other, the frustration, right? So just notice if there's any of that pattern in there for you, that you actually experience this, not just in relation to one person. Maybe there's other times in your life or other places in your life where there's this kind of unrequited quality. And I don't want to belittle that, because God, unrequited love can be really, really, really hard. So I hear you, I get it, and it can be really worth taking aim at, letting some things go. Sometimes it's about realizing, there's a fantasy, right? Because if you've been with someone and it hasn't worked out, or you've never been with someone, it might not actually be that person is ever really going to be a great partner to you. And so actually just being with the reality of it, like, yeah, maybe I'm super attracted to them. Maybe there's a lot of chemistry. Maybe there's a lot of kind of sort of love fantasy that comes when I think about them, but it's not actually the same as this is the person I want to be in a grounded, loving relationship with. And so sometimes you have to just let the dream die as well. Let the fantasy kind of run its own course and realize, yeah, that's a fantasy, and I actually want to live in reality, and I'm not making fantasies wrong. It's just seeing them as fantasies rather than as this was actually a real potential that we had to explore. The other situation that could be coming up, which is difficult, is when you were in an actual relationship and they called it off and you didn't want to. And again, if that's happened, my heart goes out to you. That just kind of sucks in some ways. And I just invite you into this deeper trust that life is on your side, that life does have your back. And if you were really meant to be with this person, life could also arrange that, right? They could arrange that even through what is implanted in his heart, right? So one way out of this is to realize, wow, if he really doesn't want to be with me, as hard and as rejecting and as tears need to be cried about that, he doesn't want to be with me. Ergo, therefore, he is not my guy, right? Because that right guy is going to want to kind of take a stand and stand by you, even when it's difficult. So there can be this sort of magic in the unfolding of the universe that life does orient you to the right person ultimately, because the wrong person didn't want to stick it out with you. Do you think that the men are afraid to commit because they have multiple partners? So I think that's a possibility that could exist. I do think the fear of commitment is way kind of more pervasive than that. And if you really were with a guy and you weren't clear that he was in a relationship with multiple partners, I would want you to be naming that, or to be trusting your intuition and kind of walking away. Because for you to want to commit to a guy, you kind of want to be able to trust him, right? And part of trusting him is, I trust that you actually want to be here, or if we're cool with having multiple partners, fine, have that as part of your conversation. But the vast majority of you are probably not going to be, really, that's not your authentic heart's desire. So sometimes these questions get answered anytime where it's like, could the man be doing this or this or this? Kind of simplify it. Either ask him, right? And if a guy's in his masculine, he won't mind being asked about something, right? Or maybe it's a difficult conversation, but it's kind of in service of the truth. Or just trust that, like, wow, you can even name, like, I don't really trust him. And you might not be trusting him for good reason if you've actually got your intuition dialed in. What about us older women about dating advice? All I think all men I've met don't even want to commit to a relationship. Most have been in too many bad relationships. Yeah, I get it. That's probably part of the challenge of dating older men, is they've probably been through the mill a bit and hurt a bunch and all that. Again, I always say to people, you only need one, right? So, 99% of men could be hurt and had too many bad relationships and not really want to step in again. And you only need that one guy that does. So when it comes to getting what you want in dating, it can be really useful, I think, to drop the universalization, by which I mean drop the tendency to look at the universal trends of, oh, men are like this or 55% men are like that, because actually you just need one guy that wants to be with you and that you want to be with. And it kind of simplifies it, because we can spend a lot of time kind of a little lost in the sociological, cultural, generational analysis. And it's actually a little distraction from you getting really clear and confronting of, there's something I want and I'm not finding it. And I want to stay specific. Like, I want one right man. I want the right guy. I don't really care about men at large. You might, if you're a sociological researcher, you might, but let's really just keep it simple and focus on the thing that you want. And here's the other thing, right? If a guy's been through a series of bad relationships and now has a kind of bad feeling about relationship, in my view, bluntly, he's got some work to do, right? He's got some healing to do. He's got some growth. He's got some shifting patterns, releasing his past, completing with what's been. And for, some of you have been on this live stream since the beginning, and I thought this was going to be another Jack, like, oh, I'll just go on for 20, 30 minutes, and here we are, 1 hour coming up 55 minutes. If you're willing to invest that much in your relationship education, I believe you should deserve or can be with a guy who also somewhat cares about his relationship IQ. And that kind of guy isn't just going to let the past determine everything that is in his future, right? He's going to get like, yeah, I've got some baggage. And, he might not have completed that work by the time he comes into contact with you. It's fine to be, most of us have ongoing work, even while we're in a committed relationship. But he's going to have a kind of spiritual relational IQ to realize, yeah, the answer to that is just not to be commitment phobic or to kind of downshift and just have a series of loverships. The answer might be that I've got to roll my sleeves up and actually integrate and mature in my man. And that might be hard to do if you've not done a lot of work and this is the later in your life. But a lot of men, that's what happens, right? They spend the first 50 years of their life kind of knuckling down and building a career and perhaps settling down, having family, whatever. And then at a certain point, they've actually got time and energy and the money in the bank to be able to do a certain kind of concentrated personal growth and spiritual development work. And there are plenty of those men out there. And that's probably what you might want to be orienting towards. I like how you use the term realities. Shared reality is a great expression. Yeah, absolutely. That comes a little bit out of the sort of authentic relating body of work. And I don't think we can underestimate that. I sometimes think I underestimate that it can be so easy to have the same event and very different realities about it. Or the same series of events in a relationship, like, oh, I'm doing this thing and showing up, but the other person is actually showing up in another way and they're attuned to that, and you're kind of missing each other. So as much as you can, and you can kind of circle each other's realities to kind of find like, oh, wow, the way that they experience love is so different than me. I don't want to subjectify you. I want to understand that you have a different set of love languages. Oh, the way that you experience showing up is different than how I do. Cool. That's kind of, because generally, and it's not easy, but if you can include both people's realities into your shared reality, if you can somehow weave that shared reality, it's a better reality, because two people generally can see more than one person, right? So, or you can just experience more of life because, wow, you really value, the stability and the foundation and the money, and I really value the community and our place in the world. And together, if we can include those things, we're actually stronger. But it's hard. It's sometimes easier if two people who have a very consonant shared reality right off the bat, it's sometimes easier for them, but it might not be as growth filled, right? Like if you basically think and feel exactly the same way all the time, but it's not like there's the grist to the mill of your own evolution, which often comes from the difference as much as it does from the similarity. I mean, you need a minimum effective dose of similarity in values and worldview normally to make a relationship work, but it's also the difference that is the juice. It's just sometimes hard, and not everyone wants that kind of relationship, right? If you want a relationship that's just kind of like a comfortable slipper, you may want to major more on the similarities and that we just think the same way, and that we have the same politics and we have the same cultural view and all those things. But for a lot of us, we're actually here because we want to transform and we want to be more ourselves, and we want to expand, and we want to experience the more of the essence of who we really are. And normally those are more transformative relationships, and they might not be as easy, but they're sure hell worth it. Thanks, Anya. I'm glad you are enjoying the live energy of this. Doing my best. I'm just grateful that people are here and showing up, and there's been some awesome questions today. So thank you all for your participation. Do you think it can grow from friends to being a couple? Yes, I do. I just think you have to be careful about how long you constellate as a friendship without perhaps exploring the kind of romantic or sexual side of it. And sometimes it doesn't work, right? So you might just have to be open to exploring, does this work? And if it doesn't, just being truthful and maybe continuing your friendship. And sometimes, here's the thing, you actually have to put your friendship on the line. And the reason you put your friendship on the line is because you having the love relationship that you want is probably bigger than any particular friendship. Right? So sometimes you're willing to say, okay, I could risk losing this friendship. Hopefully not. Hopefully we could explore it and still, if it doesn't work out, keep that friendship intact. And often you can. But actually, what I really want in my life is a relationship. Like I really want to share my life with someone. So I don't want to not be exploring with other people because I've got this friend who I always have a question mark about, who I'm kind of keeping as my option in my back pocket. I think I'm more of a fan of saying, no, let's get real. Let's be with that. Let's have that conversation, have that exploration, kind of move on either with that person or not. But we don't want to keep you in a holding pattern. If you know you are good for someone, how do you get them to see that? Okay, so my curiosity in some ways is the inverse, which is, how do you know if someone is good for you? Because, let's say you're a good person, you've got a good heart, you could be good for a lot of people, right? You could be healing and supportive and loving and heart open to a lot of people. But for it to be a real relationship, you need some of that back in your direction, right? So that's where my curiosity, I may be way off the mark, but my curiosity in that question is, why do you need them to see you're good for them? Like, if they can't see that, they can't really see you. And if they can't really see you, why you're in a relationship with them? That might be a little bit kind of laying it down, but that would be my curiosity, that most of the times we kind of know, even if it's, like we have a difficult relationship and we're working it together, but I get that the work in it is where we're good for each other, because you don't let me get away with the things that I get away with other people. Like, I have to be on my A game in a certain way. I have to show up. I have to listen. I have to really pay attention. Like, absolutely find someone like that to be in relationship with. But if you're having to convince someone you're good for them, you could be in a little bit of a savior, victim, or martyr, or something dynamic, or good girl, nice girl, healer. And that might be stopping you having a more real and authentic connection, possibly. And, if the guy is the right guy, I think he'll know, like, by your fruits ye shall know. I mean, he can discern that you're good for him because he just kind of gets it. So I wouldn't be trying to persuade a guy of too many things. I think you can tell him your view and have him look at it. But I also think there's a lot of things that when guys come to their own realization, it's a more sort of stable foundation for a relationship. Can chemistry build with time? Yeah, I think chemistry can build with time. Absolutely. I think there's probably like a minimum effective dose off the bat, usually, that there's a sort of like, oh, I'm somewhat drawn to you, even if it's not initially like just a sexual thing. I'm kind of, there's a noticing, or there's a something. But I have also known couples where their first encounter wasn't really good and they thought that person was a bit stupid or something like that. And then actually it's unfolded in a beautiful direction. So what I'd be mindful of is there's a kind of unconscious attraction that is a loud chemistry straight off the bat that often isn't necessarily what stabilizes into a good long-term relationship. So unconscious attraction is just that sort of like, wow, I've just noticed you across the room and I'm really arrested by you. And it's more at the kind of animal sexual level. And, you can absolutely go and explore that, but just don't be surprised sometimes if that isn't the thing that is as powerful as a bit more of a conscious attraction, like I'm attracted to you. And in my conscious awareness, we also make somewhat sense as a couple. Do I believe in the law of attraction, Abraham Hicks? So I believe that the law of attraction is a partial truth. So yeah, absolutely, I believe in that. It's not like I've studied deeply in that body of work. There is absolutely, in my experience, some relationship between what you kind of how you resonate with life and how life resonates with you, or what you make yourself available for and what life brings into your path. The only thing I would probably say, and I don't know this body of work well enough to make this as a sort of, yes, this is I know, but this is my curiosity, is some of the ways I see law of attraction applied could be described as a more by me reality, which means I create my reality. I am the creator. And there are other types of reality that we sometimes refer to as things like through me. That's actually a little less like I'm trying to manifest everything in my life. It's a little more like I'm in a deeper rapport with life, and I notice which doors are opening. I notice which potentials are living through me. I notice what season of life it is. I notice what is growing and dying in my life. And it's kind of like I let life live through me a little bit more than, I want a particular thing and I can manifest it. At a certain point for some people, that becomes less meaningful than, what does life want to live through me? Like, what about if I put life a little bit more either as my co-pilot, or even if I just fully surrender and sort of let life have its way with me, not as a victim, like I'm passive, I have my agency, I have my desire, but I really let life have the seat of control rather than, no, I'm in control. So sometimes people can get really good at the law of attraction, manifest all sorts of things, become super wealthy, manifest relationships, but they kind of, spiritually speaking, they're still in control. And most of the spiritual journey for a lot of us is actually letting that go, right? And letting life and letting our souls map and letting the universe potentiate us in a way that we don't know exactly how our life is going to unfold. And so that's what I'd say. It's like any personal growth technology, it just has its place, and it also probably has its limitations. That would be my curiosity. Can a relationship be successful with a 36-year age gap? Sure. It might be that it has less likelihood of being successful than some other relationships. I think what is most important for people is, do you align on worldview? Like, is the sort of broad way that you think of life and what you attune to and what's important, is there some kind of similarity there? Like, do we have a sort of similar stage of development so that the things that we kind of want to work on and develop are similar? Do we have a similar stage of life, right? Like sometimes, someone can be 70 and still be, exploring what their next career is, right? Someone can be 43 and retired and wanting to live in retirement. So it's not so much about age as kind of stage of life and reality. And some people, and I'm no expert on this, but if you talk to astrologers or people that sort of look at, life paths and soul maps, some people, it's kind of in their stars, I think, to be with people that there's an age gap, and that can go either way. It could be older or younger. So if that's you, you could also just go to someone like that if you believe in that style of work, and just kind of have them perhaps reflect back to you, what seems to be in the sort of stars for you. Seems like I don't know. Hi from Hungary. Well, welcome. My guy is 72. Okay, my guy's 72, but is physically fit as a 47. Was burned financially by 2 marriages. At his age, I'm not feeling the marriage connection for us, but we have a very good relationship. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big fan of people being in the truth of a connection. Not every connection is meant to be a marriage. And if someone's had marriages before and they're kind of like, I'm not available for that, that might just be true for them. It could be that there's a little bit of defense and protection in there. It could be that actually what you want is not marriage, but you want a sort of commitment. Sometimes people can structure things so it's like, hey, we're not actually going to get married, but we are going to have some kind of commitment to each other, or we're going to have some kind of ceremony, or we're going to share some of our financial lives. It's like you can get a little bit creative. What I'm curious, I think most when you strip it down, is like, are you going to be with me? Whether we call that marriage or not. I know people who are long-term partnered, obviously not married, have all their lives together. They're very much married in a conventional sense, just not by name, So is financial equality in a relationship important? Seems most I talk to online, when I tell them my career, that's the end of the conversation. So I'm curious, maybe you could just give me the next level of detail on that. Is that you have this kind of career where you make a ton of money, or you don't make much money, or where is that at? Again, I don't try and have too many rules about this. I think most women who are attracted to guys that are somewhat in their masculine want a guy to have a minimum amount of financial direction, right? Doesn't necessarily mean he has to make more money or most money or half, but just a sense that he's kind of tuned into that, and that he cares, and that he's taking care of it in some ways. And it's sort of like whatever works. I know couples that work great where, the woman's the major breadwinner, and the guy actually does more of the child rearing, and that's great. So I think there's lots of permutations. I think what's important is what is true to you gets metabolized in the relationship. If it's true to you that you really want a guy to take more of that lead, and that feels right and true for you, that you communicate that, or you attract that with the right guy. I think there's also a kind of so let me say this another way. I think we're in an era where we are able to have more differentiation in our relationships, right? So rather than perhaps the old model, which at times might have been a bit codependent, what we're looking for is two people in their wholeness and in their essence to come together in partnership as best they can. And so what that might mean financially is there's actually a little bit more nuance in that arrangement, where perhaps there are a bunch of things that we contribute to together, and maybe we contribute differentially based upon what we're earning, or if there's a desire for the guy that he wants to put more in the pot. And then there might be some things that actually we differentiate, and it's like, cool, that's just mine and that's just yours, or that's just my responsibility and that's just yours. So I'm sort of laying that out because I think there can be a bit of creativity to find, well, what is the way of that feels good? Some people like to know everything is exactly in this joint pot. We have no differentiation. And I sense that that's fewer of us now that probably want that than in the past. And sometimes you might want to know, yeah, he's taken me on a date with his money. You want that experience. So again, I'm just a pragmatist. I'm a fan of what works for two people. And if it works for you, and it really does, I don't care if it looks anything like anyone else. It's kind of like it works for you. But can you bring your authentic desires into that conversation? All right. Hello to London, Meredith. Hello to Dublin. Thanks for joining us. Your question is, where should I go to meet someone? So I have a little bit of a honeypot metaphor. So I didn't come up with that metaphor, but that's the metaphor that I think works in this instance, which is sort of like, how can you be most in yourself, most true to yourself, most in your essence, doing the things that you want to do with your life, going to the places that you want to go, whether that's yoga or whether that's travel or whether that's cooking class or whether that's humanitarian cause. Kind of show up in the places that you want to show up and notice who's there and practice being open to connections. They don't have to go anywhere, but just sort of being open and noticing who's in the room, smiling at people, saying hello. I think that sort of you being in a place where you feel yourself and what you might be able to magnetize from there, I think for most people is a better strategy than kind of banging your head online if online isn't working for you. And it's a bit like, as I said earlier in this conversation, it's a bit like sales and marketing. Just find something that works. The way that you do sales and the way that I do sales could be so different. But if it works for you, that's really what you want, right? So, how do you meet someone? You could just start walking down a bike path and just say hello to people as you meet them, or you could just sit in a coffee shop and notice who you feel attracted to and say hello as you walk past. Or you could commit that every time you go to a class or a workshop, you're going to say hello to one new person or 5 new people and just sort of practice being in connection with the people that life brings into your path. Can you share some books to read that you speak about in your videos? Okay, so I'm a real fan of a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. I'm just typing this in the chat box. That book really helped me wake up in certain ways. I'm quite a fan of, from an awakening and sort of spiritual development perspective, I'm quite a fan of Eckhart Tolle. I think he's just really clear. Maybe you can let me know if there's anything specific that you're kind of interested in, and I'll see if there's something that's come up. A lot of what I teach, coach about has also come from the sort of hard school of Knox and personal experience. So it's not like I'm constantly just trying to read everything that's new in the field. I'm generally a fan of books that stand the test of time. They're not like fad books, but they're sort of maybe teaching something that's a little bit more essentially true. Conscious dating books, you might look at Gay and Katie Hendricks. If you haven't come across them, just putting this in the chat box. They have a book called something like Conscious Loving. I think that's a good start. I used to be in this body of work called the Diamond Heart. It's kind of like a spiritual school. And the main thought leader there, or the founder, is a guy called A.H. Almas. That's his pen name. And I'll just put this here. This is quite a specific line it's a little scientific in some ways, or kind of, it's not a particularly vibrant read in my experience. It's a little bit more just a very clear and sober take on things that can happen. But he does include a little bit in there about relationships and the places that we get hooked and attached. And I really value his perspective. View on long distance relationships. My view on long distance relationships is, if you want to invest in them, make them short distance relationships. So invest the energy early enough to see, have we got something that's worth pursuing, and then pursue it if you can, and just know that you might be taking a little bit higher risk than in some other situations, but sort of get to spend the time together. I'm not a fan of long distance relationships that take a long time for it to find out if there's something there. I'm more a fan of like, hey, okay, we're going to put the energy in. Yeah, maybe we've got to fly across the country a lot. Maybe we've got to work hard to book our holiday off work at the same time, but kind of do that in order that and that it's not one person's subtle way of not having to really be in a real relationship or commit. And I've done a bunch of it, and I know it can be really hard. So I feel for you. little twin flames, not met my forever partner. Yeah, sometimes there's a bunch of kind of working through things. I can certainly relate to that from my experience. I'm a nurse's aide, Jack, low income. Okay, so I think what you're saying is, is it a problem if there's a guy that's maybe higher income and maybe he's going to contribute more into relationships, something like that? I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I think ultimately when two people come together, as best you can, you sort of got to look at what you've got. And it might be that let's just say he was sick for a year and actually both of you had to live off your quote low income. That might happen. It's like, yeah, I think you can only be with where you are, right? With what you earn. Now, whether that means you are always looking for someone to take care of you financially, that I would be a bit curious about, if that's a dynamic. But I think there are many ways you can contribute to a relationship. I am a fan of an equal contribution, broadly speaking, over a period of time, but that doesn't necessarily have to be financial. That can be all sorts of things, right? That can be quality time, gifts. It can be how you show up and care for someone. So I wouldn't just make that too much of a primary factor. How do I determine if a man will wait for sex in order to find someone who wants a relationship and avoid men who only want sex? Well, I think you wait. In a sense, you can know if a guy will wait if you ask him to wait. And that might sound a bit simple, but I think it's kind of true. And I think the right guy won't become the wrong guy because you slowed him down. So the right guy will want to attune to you, will want to know what your desires are, will want to respect your boundaries, will want to trust your intuition. And if any of that is saying, hey, actually, I'm not ready for this, fine. And if he can't be with your readiness or boundary, I doubt that he's really the right guy for you. And good on you that you support yourself just fine. Awesome. That's great. Do you think that eventually you meet the right guy, that it's just wait for it, or should we push for that right person through, for example, dating apps? Well, I'm going to give you a sporting metaphor. I don't know if this works. And I used to play a lot of soccer, football in England where I grew up. And I remember a guy saying one day that people always say to him, like, oh, you're always in the right place at the right time. And he was trying to make the point that I'm a ton of the times I'm in the right place at the wrong time. I make that run and nothing happens. I make that run and nothing happens. And I think it's a little bit like that in dating. I think you need to keep putting yourself in the arena. You need to keep open. You need to keep meeting people, having conversations, going on dates, making it clear with your circle, your friends, that you are ready to receive the right person into your life. And then you surrender, right? It's like active surrender. It's participatory surrender. It's like your participation is required. You're not going to meet the love of your life sitting on the couch in your basement, right? Probably, and maybe online if you're doing it online. So you need to kind of participate, but you don't want to force it. You just want to keep participating. And trusting life is that we don't know if you're going to meet that guy tomorrow or 10 years from now. We don't know. And that can be hard if you feel like, wow, I keep putting myself out there and I'm not going to be met. But it's sort of like life's delays and not life's denials. If it's true that life wants for you to be in relationship, or that's a really true path for you, it will happen. We just don't know when. And so you sometimes have to suck it up a little bit and be courageous and keep participating, even when at times you may lack that basic trust that it's going to work out. Having trust and courage and faith isn't that you never feel a lack of trust. It's that you are willing to be with a lack of trust and continue to try to trust even when it's really hard. I'm just thinking of this recently, even in terms of us finding our next home. It's like I wanted it to happen earlier than it happened. And at times I was like, should I just accept this other thing that I know intuitively isn't the right place? And it nearly always unfolds that actually, if you listen and wait and be patient and keep dialing into your intuition, ultimately something better does unfold. But it takes a whole load of courage to keep trusting, not just like blind faith, but just like, wow, life, this is my prayer. Like, I want this and I want you to continue to support me. And I notice I'm feeling afraid that it's not going to happen for me. And I'm going to continue to trust, like, can you meet me and hold me? That's sort of the prayer, I think, that sits under it. Taking action on dating apps, absolutely. Keep taking action, keep making offers, keep asking people to get you a blind date, or say to a guy, hey, you're hot, I want you to take me on a date. Keep asking the questions. But what you don't want to force is pretending that a guy is your guy when he's not your guy, right? So that you don't want to force the outcome. You can just keep participating and energizing and relating and connecting and opening. That's on your side of the fence. Whether the right guy shows up in right timing, that's life's business, really. I mean, that can sound kind of impersonal, but it's like you don't get to decide the timing of meeting your person. life will decide that, and you get to decide how much you participate. Thanks, Meredith, and hey to Sweden, Victoria. This is from Tris. Could you give advice about how to tell the difference between sensing the divine masculine in a man and the feeling of being compatible with him? Both feel really balancing and pleasant. I don't talk a huge amount about the divine masculine. That's not necessarily sort of native language that I use. So I'm going to start on the compatibility end of this. I'm not sure that compatibility is necessarily a feeling, right? There might be a feeling of we're really connected or we're really in sync. There might be your intuition, which sometimes occurs to people as kind of like a feeling. Sometimes it just is sort of like a knowing or like a third eye sort of sensing. That intuition, I think, is what you want to pay attention to. And then compatibility, I think, is also sometimes a little bit of a sober thing where you kind of say, like, do we have the same worldview? Do we have defensive styles that are compatible? Are we both thinkers or feelers? Is there a way that we kind of parse reality and experience life in a way that we can kind of pitch and catch with each other? And some of that stuff isn't that sexy. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, how do you know whether to invest in a business? I'm seem to be using business and sporting metaphors today, so I'm going to continue with that. Now, there might be a lot of the felt stuff, right? Like, wow, that business, it's right, it's messaging, its purpose, its raison d'etre is really enlivening to me. Like, I really love what they do in the world. And then there's kind of like, how do you know to invest in a business? You kind of have to look at the financials, right? And you kind of have to look at the return on investment and the risks and the opportunities. And some of that isn't super sexy. It's like buying a house, but you still need to like do an inspection, and you need to find out if there's a radon issue. And it's sort of a similar thing with compatibility. I think sometimes there's a little bit of like, in all sobriety and objectivity, do we kind of want the same things? Are we at a similar stage of life? Are we at a similar stage of development? Do we think of the world in similar terms that we can kind of actually build a foundation together? So I don't necessarily know if compatibility is fully revealed only through intuition. Maybe it is, but maybe for some of us, it's also useful just to do the more kind of conscious, rational side of that, which would be like getting an inspection on a house. Andrid, thanks for being here. Hello, welcome. I've been showing up at Home Depot doing home improvements. I want to meet another homeowner. Yeah, great. That's a kind of example of that. There may be many other places that sort of homeowners also might show up, right? Like there's maybe things that homeowners are more likely to support in their community, right? Because they're actually rooted in their community, and you might be able to go to some of those events. It might be that there's an annual, I don't know, I just saw it down the road here where they close the pool and let the dogs swim in it, right? That might be something that people who actually own and really a long-term in that community, they might be more likely to go to. So there could be some proxies for how do you meet someone who owns their own home, if that's important to you. I have not read Emerald Tablets. Let me know if you think I should. Gary Chapman, love languages. Yeah, absolutely. Am I from England? Yes, I am from England, but I've lived in the States 8 years, so I have a slightly corrupted or evolved accent, depending on how you look at it. We get a bit of stick here on YouTube, actually. People, I think, have been misinterpreting the fact that I don't try and speak with a more Americanized accent, but believe me, Americans still think I'm British, so there you go. Do you believe in soulmates? Again, I'm trying to have probably as few beliefs about these things. I think there's so much about sort of soul level relating that I don't know. I mean, I think there's so much that we haven't yet known, probably individually and certainly collectively. I do believe in distinguishing what I sometimes have heard referred to as high school love from a more mature love. And high school love is really based in like, oh, I want to be with you because I feel good with you. And I think mature love is a bit more, I realize you are a human that has light and dark, and I want to love you and all of that. And we might have some work to do together, and I'd love to do that work with you. I'd love to build a life with you. So I've paid a bit more attention to that mature love. Whether that's soulmates, twin flames, like there's a lot of language that I don't think necessarily has a completely culturally shared definition of. My imagination is that there might be more than one person that you could have a soulmate type experience with. But I've also been in the relationship world helping people do their relationship work. And I'm a real fan of people learning their relationship lessons. And I think what a lot of us think about soulmates is probably a kind of an easier sort of we just kind of love on each other, and we're maybe cut from the same cloth, or we're destined to be together in this lifetime. And my observation is that most of the people that I know whose relationships I really kind of look at and be like, wow, that's a cool relationship, they're doing their work, right? They're waking up. They are finding the places where they can't love themselves, or where they struggle to be with someone else, and I'm kind of turned on by that, because I think it's just real and crunchy, and that is really what expands our capacities and our souls. So I probably have a little bit of a different sort of orientation to that. Now, sometimes if people have really done their relationship work on the other side of that, maybe there's some other things that can show up for them. But I would be less concerned about sort of how we name the relationship in a way, and more concerned about, is my intuition that this is the thing? Does life seem to really be pointing me towards this? Hooked up with a friend. It was great. He stopped talking to me for weeks. Then he contacted me. I wanted friends with benefits, but he shut it down. But he still wants to hang out. What's going on? That's a good question. I don't know what's going on. What do you think is going on? I mean, it's hard for me to say. Is it common that sometimes people, after exploring being sexual, feel the need to shut something down? Yeah, I think that can be common, because it's kind of risky. And so one of the things, again, in the language I gave earlier here, if someone really wants to be your companion, they may not necessarily want to be sexual with you, right? They may want to be connected to you. Maybe they want to hug or hold your hand, but they don't necessarily want to be fully romantic and sexual with you. And sometimes that can be a difference in these situations, where one person is kind of like, oh, I kind of want to be your friend, aka companion, and I want to have benefits, aka lover. So I kind of see you as a companion lover. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the other person is available for, or is true to. So sometimes I've seen these situations where really the energy is companionship, but one person is also kind of more attracted sexually to the other person. That can be what's going on. The guy shut down. I mean, hey, guys, pretty much every guy I know, myself included, shuts down at some times, right? Because we need to process, we need to individuate, we need to kind of get our perspective on things. So men withdrawing, I think, is just part of the territory. Not to just tolerate men, withdrawing ad infinitum, but just to say most men, just like most women, have an open and a closure. Most men have a kind of contact and withdraw dynamic at some point. And sometimes there's nothing really to know about that, other than the guy's kind of shut down, and at some point he might come back. Now, if he's doing that in a way that doesn't really work for you in the relationship, fine, then you might want to have a conversation and communication about that. But I would just generally say, friends with benefits, there's going to be such a limitation to what you can get out of that. So versus what you might be able to get from a partner, where you're like, yeah, we've got some stuff and we're going to work it. So I would also ask you, like, is that really what you want, friends with benefits? Is that kind of your highest aspiration, or is it just that's in your life at the moment and you want to sort of explore it? Because it can be hard to do real work, is my imagination. I've been seeing a guy. He often goes places with his friends, and there's signs of him cheating, but I don't want to accuse him. One time he came home with a woman's panties in his bag. What do I do? Oh, gosh. So I think that there is a way that you can explore something with a guy that doesn't necessarily accuse him, but that just says, hey, I have a story, right? Or I have a curiosity, whether you are seeing other women. I also found some panties in your bag. Could you tell me what's going on? So there's a way that you don't have to make him wrong for that. You can just be like, what's going on, buddy? And I think if a guy is really in his masculine core, he's going to be able to handle that conversation. And I really want to just encourage you to trust yourself. There probably aren't that many good reasons why a guy comes home with another woman's pants in his bag. I'm open to being enlightened, but I would probably be pretty hot on the trail of wanting that explained. And I would be really in the exploration of, is this a guy that I can trust? And maybe it's just a guy who actually doesn't want to be in a committed relationship with you, and that's the sobriety that you need to wake up to. It's like, oh yeah, cool, he does go out and connect kind of intimately with other women, and he's not really choosing to be in an exclusive relationship with me. Why am I participating? So that might also be something that you want to contribute. Again, I think when we're in our mature masculine, we mostly are willing to talk about the things, even if they're difficult, or we have shame around them, or we're not proud of how we behaved. I don't think that you should necessarily have to worry too much about a guy's, it's like if I'm being defensive about something, like what am I really defending? I think as a guy, when you're kind of a bit more integrated, there's a way that you actually want to be more available for the truth of something. And sometimes that truth, which we maybe need to be better as men at communicating, is I like you, I like relating with you, I want to be in connection with you, I would love to be your lover or companion, but I'm just not going to be your partner. I'm not available for that. And if you want more from me, just realize I'm not available for that, and then you can have your choice. How do I respond to a man who gets disappointed because I didn't respond to his text? So, speaking in a general way, your job is not to have a man not experience disappointment, right? Like, part of this can be unhinging that, if you're a human in relationship with someone, you're going to impact them. And sometimes that impact isn't going to be positive. That's just life and reality, I think, as I see it. So partly it can be just coming to terms with that. Sometimes you can think you're doing the kindest thing and you still hurt someone, right? Sometimes you say something that you had a great intention and you disappoint someone. Your job is not to stop disappointing people. It's to actually be comfortable, or to learn to be with, cast it back on yourself. When someone is disappointed with me, what happens? Where do I go? How do I show up? That might be more of the work, right? So don't worry about disappointing a guy. If a guy is in his wounds, then he might not be able to be disappointed. That might be grounds for him breaking off the connection, but that wasn't going to be a connection that lasted, really. So again, I'm trying to bring a little bit of the sort of sober perspective to this. Guys are going to experience all kinds of feelings around you. Mature men learn that they've got to own their experience as best they can. They might have requests of you. They might have, could you do this differently? Or, I have there's something you do that doesn't impact me in the way I want it to. Can we talk about that? Could you stop doing that? That could be a request, but it's not your job to not disappoint me. It's your job to be okay that you will disappoint me sometimes. Okay, a little bit of conversation about that previous one. I had a breakup 4 years ago. How could I open my heart for somebody new? Till today, I couldn't. Okay, yeah, again, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Quick flag, if you haven't seen it, I do have a video about heartache and heartbreak and how to move on from that. So I'd really encourage you to go check that out. I think the essence of this is actually that you grieve what happened, right? Because normally when we can't step into something new after a big period of time, it's because actually we're still a little bit stuck with the old experience. I'm not making that wrong. That's a superhuman thing. And you might want to learn that if you can grieve that more fully, it's like your heart then wants to reopen. The heart is closed because it wants to protect itself. Normally it wants to protect itself from the pain and the not feeling. And of course, who wants to feel grief at length? And it can also be a really beautiful experience sometimes to really just grieve and cry and just feel that sadness and that longing and that vulnerability and that implausibility, and just to really let yourself go there. And sometimes you need support. Sometimes you need a ritual. You need to put aside time on the calendar to make it happen. But you might just need to keep doing that. And at some point, normally that runs its course. It might take, weeks and months and years of doing that sometimes. And it can be a long haul and that can feel hard, but you'll kind of know when you're mostly through that. And then, there might be a new possibility that arises for something else. So, all of that to say is it might not be right for you to open your heart to someone else until you've done a bit more of that work, or you might find there's a connection with someone which actually allows you to do that work, and that may not be your forever person. That might just be there's a connection. Sometimes connections can be really healing, and that's actually really what this is about. It's just one person, or it can be mutual, but often it's one person supporting another in their healing, and that's a beautiful thing when that comes about. So I think you'll know when you're available for something, as long as you're turning towards what's there and not kind of avoiding or suppressing the need to grieve. Is it possible for a man I was seeing to become flaky and disinterested after many perfect dates because I wasn't vulnerable or because I didn't want to sleep with him before trust was established? I don't think that that's really that possible with the right guy. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of men that could become disinterested, or should I say uninterested, because they wanted something and you weren't available for it, but I wouldn't be worried about that. I think the simple maxim here is the right guy will wait. The right guy will want what you want to be part of the conversation. He'll see you, he'll attune to you, he'll care about you. And I don't think there should be like I wasn't vulnerable enough, or sort of, when I hear that, the curiosity I have is whether you might be taking a bit too much responsibility in this process. And like, actually, if a guy wants to be with you, he might have to work to be with you. He might have to keep showing up and initiating and making you feel safe and having a sexual experience in right timing, if that's what's going to happen. So, yeah, it's sort of like trusting that the right guy will keep showing up and anyone else isn't the right guy, really. They might be an important connection. They might be great fun. They might be all sorts of things. But in terms of like the right partner, they probably aren't. So, trust your intuition if you suspect cheating. Absolutely. Get 80% of your results from 20% of your efforts. That's about efficiency. Yeah, that's the 80-20 maxim, right? The normal way, Pareto's law. 80% of your yield comes from 20% of your input. I'm also using that in a different way here, as I did earlier, which is to say, keep 80% of your attention on yourself and 20% over there. Practice doing that, because then you'll get much more feedback, intuition, and awareness. And for those of us that tend to collapse in a relationship or lose ourselves, there can be a way that we actually learn how to sit a bit more comfortably in our own center. How long is it reasonable to have a man process and withdraw? That's a good question. So I'm going to imagine that you're in a relationship. I don't know if that's true, because I think it's different. I think if you're dating someone and you don't really have a container, I think it's a different question. If you're in a relationship, I think that's the kind of thing that you can have a conscious conversation about, and actually you can potentially get some agreements, right? Sometimes what you may actually want is that before he goes and withdraws, there's a communication, right? You might just want to hear, hey, I'm going to withdraw. I love you and I'll be back in contact, something like that. Or, hey, I'm happy to connect with you at 5 p.m. tomorrow. And if I still need more space, I'll let you know, but I will make a connection with you. So that kind of thing can work. I'm more interested in what mutual agreements work between two people, probably, than a sort of a gross rule that we're trying to apply en masse. So what would work for you? Again, I would make a distinction between a withdrawn defense and a man's need to withdraw, or anyone's need to withdraw. I think we all have a sort of a healthy need for sort of privacy and self-time and connection with self, which could look like, yeah, I'm just going to withdraw, or sort of man cave up if you're a man. And that might be different than my style of defense is to withdraw, which, again, you have a right to your defense, right? So I'm not making a withdrawn defense wrong. I'm just saying you might want to learn as a woman to distinguish that. Like, is he withdrawing because he kind of needs to recuperate and recharge and self-time? Is he withdrawing because he actually is we're in an argument and that's a kind of defense, and he might want over time to look at that with you, or to be able to say, as partners, we're helping each other ideally relax our defenses. And, his defense might be withdrawn and your defense might be, withdrawn, or it might be dynamic, right? Where if you get upset, you become confrontational. It might be disarming, where you sort of like don't really tell the truth and you try and make light of things and you kind of laugh them off. There's different styles of defense. Ideally, we want that included so that we can heal from it. And so we have to deploy it less, right? All of us, I think it's useful that we have our defenses in our back pockets. I think they're evolutionarily useful. There might be a time to be like, whoa, that's not cool. I'm going to withdraw. Don't do that. Or I need my space. But ideally, in intimacy, and someone we trust and love and trying to build a life with, we want to try and do that the minimum possible, right? So we're both mutually invested in supporting the relaxation of our mutual defenses. So that could also be part of it. What I'm a fan of is, where possible, trying to keep agreements. Now, that can be really difficult if you're arguing and in disrepair, and sometimes that can go out the window a little bit. But if you're like having an agreement that he's going to take a maximum of 1 day or 2 days or 3 hours to withdraw and to come back into contact, I would like to see that being respected by him. And if not, that you guys renegotiate the agreement, rather than you just constantly fall foul of a kind of agreement that's not in place. But I would like him to suggest that as well, because you may or may not be someone that has much of a need for withdrawing. Some guys, they do really have a need to spend a whole bunch of time on their own. And that's actually what's kind of true and good for them. And you want to find a way that works. For some people, all they need to receive is a heart emoji, once in several hours or a day, to know, hey, I'm still kind of I'm in your picture, and that's all I need to know. Some people need to have real-time, quality time connection. So a lot of this comes back into love languages, your unique needs and desires. How do you communicate those? And not expecting him to meet all your needs and desires, right? That actually you have some ways that when he's withdrawing, you're not just stuck on an island of self, that you actually have ways to meet your own needs as well in your life, because that will probably serve the relationship. How do you remain friends after friends with benefits? He just wants to be friends but flirts sexually. I don't understand. I had to cut him off. Yeah, I mean, I'm not claiming I have massive expertise in how to remain friends after friends with benefits, other than I think, part of being a friend is that you try and tell the truth to one another where you can. And it might be that you actually need a period of not being friends in order to kind of heal from that, and to not be triggered by his sort of sexual advances that are actually just rotations and not something else. So I would sort of trust your own discernment and judgment and intuition, and name what you need. And sometimes it takes a little bit of taking a time off for a friendship in order for it to actually come back more strongly. So I wouldn't be afraid of that. I would just be communicating what you're doing. I wouldn't do it unilaterally. Diana, thank you. I'm glad you like Eckhart Tolle, and I'm glad you like my advice. I appreciate that. Thanks. I don't think we have long-term in our future. I feel like he wants more emotionally from me, but I just don't feel it. The sex was fabulous. He says no, but still sees me daily and is a bit proprietary. Huh, got it. Yeah, maybe that's just true. I trust your intuition. Tris, glad you're here. Harry, thank you. Do you need to heal completely in order to meet the right person? No. I don't think you need to heal completely in order to meet the right person, because, just kind of cutting to the chase, show me a fully healed person. I'm not fully healed. Are you fully healed? Maybe there's a few walking amongst us and we can honor that they have fully healed. But I also think that healing is not just a one and done, right? Like, it's like you heal something, right? You heal your need to be the nice guy, right? Or you heal your need to be a caretaker, and you heal that. And then there's some other layer where you notice, oh, actually, I lose my power in this way. And then you practice and work on it, and maybe you heal it. And then eventually you discover, oh, I was wounded by my father in this particular way, or I was wounded by my mother in this particular way, or I'm actually being wounded in this very relationship, right? That happens for most of us. There's going to be times where we get hurt in relationship, even a really good one. So I sort of see healing as a little bit more like breathing, in the sense it's probably going to be always there. Now, are there major bits of healing that are just going to make it hard without them to be in a better relationship? Yeah, that could be true. What I want to make sure is that there's not this sort of like, until I'm healed, I won't fully love myself. Right? Obviously, for most of us, self-love is part of our healing. Or until I'm healed, I won't allow myself to be in relationship. It might be, and I think this is certainly true for me, a part of our healing is in relationship, because actually the relationship points to the pattern that needs to be healed. And it's not every pattern in relationship can be healed by that particular relationship. Sometimes you need the relationship and it kind of is bad and it's hard and you have a bad experience, and you pop out and say, oh, I lost my center, or I had to earn love, or I started to kind of be a caretaker for this person, and I don't want to be that, So I'm quite a fan of sort of getting in the arena. Now, if you've never had a time where you weren't in a relationship, really, I would encourage you to try having a period of time where you are outside of relationship, right? Most of us mature from having some time outside of relationship, and you might be the same. So if you've never lived alone, if you've never spent significant time with yourself, that is an important part of healing for most of us, because it allows us to differentiate and individuate and build foundation and find our own center and love on ourselves. So those things are all good. So that can be another aspect. If you've never had significant time outside relationship, maybe try that. I dated a guy for 9 months. I took a break. We're seeing each other again and taking things slowly. I want to know how long I should wait before asking where things are going. Yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily wait too long, because you guys have already been around the block together, and it should be that things perhaps become clearer sooner than they would have. And if you can approach that conversation non-judgmentally and with minimum expectations, like you don't need to hear a certain thing, you actually want to hear his truth, if that's possible. Obviously, it's hard to be completely impersonal when the truth relates to us, and we might fear rejection or the future of the relationship, but as best you can, I would encourage that, because you have a right, I think, when you've been relating with a guy for the best part of a year, just to kind of know where you stand. Not that you have to stand in any particular place with him, but I think it's okay for him to let you know where you stand, and perhaps vice versa. Is it possible to feel like grieving the loss of the same relationship again after 6 months? Yeah, I think for most of us, grief comes in waves, and sometimes it's unexpected. And I think if you've been in a deep connection, or a significant connection with someone, it can take a long time to heal from that sometimes. And sometimes it's only at certain times. Like, life has its wisdom, right? If you're completely overwhelmed with your life responsibilities, sometimes life is like, okay, just knuckle under, make that happen. And then you complete that project, or you were caring for someone full time and you no longer care for them, or you change career or job and there's more available space. And then life says, oh, we have some unmetabolized business. Now you've got a little bit more space and availability. We're going to pop that up and we're going to have you look at it. So yeah, absolutely. Healing and grieving, these things can take a long time. They can happen in different waves. I think all you can do is just keep turning towards it, right? As best you can, with as much heart and as much courage and as much humility as you can. And then kind of let life arrange it for you. If you need to grieve, life will kind of let you know that you need to grieve. I've also had my own experiences of, I remember actually when I used to live in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, I was up on the Marin Headlands, kind of overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge and then the Pacific Ocean. And suddenly I just welled up and just cried and cried and cried. And I think I was having the experience of actually grieving more than one relationship at the same time, because I don't think I realized how to grieve relationships. And I think I was sort of in this view of like, oh, well, if it didn't work out, then that wasn't quite the right one for me, which may be true. And just because it's not the right relationship does not mean that you aren't going to be grieving it. So I think it can happen at different times and in different ways. I would just trust your process, trust your intuition, trust yourself as best you can. Jack, what if you've had lots and lots of time outside of relationships? Yeah, that can actually also be equally as true as not having spent a lot of time outside of relationships. So yeah, so is there a question in there? Like, if you've spent a lot of time out of relationships, it might be that getting into a relationship feels kind of more difficult or less familiar. And I think just permission for that to be okay, that might be the case. That the right relationship, the right guy might be willing to take a bit more time with you. Like maybe it takes a little bit more time for you to kind of get into a rhythm with someone, or maybe there are specific fears that come up, right? Like if you're used to spending a lot of time on your own, it might be that the fear of engulfment or enmeshment comes up, or fear of too much intimacy. And yeah, getting kind of back into the swing of things. I mean, I'm sort of a fan of just giving permission. And what I mean by that is you can only be where you are, right? You are in the right place. If you sort of think of it from a sort of divine cosmic perspective, we're all in the right place, even when it's a crappy, shitty, hard place. We're kind of in the right place. And you just got to work with what you've got. And if what you've got is, yeah, I'm a little afraid of stepping in a relationship, I would do your best to reveal that as best you can, so that someone else can kind of align with your reality and you can weave that shared reality. I would not be down on yourself. And maybe there's specific support you need, either from someone you're in relationship with, or from your friends or from professionals. Kind of get the support that you need. And yeah, know that fear of enmeshment, if that's real for you, that probably won't fully go away in some ways. It might just be that it's kind of like a bit of a rise and fall. And there are times where you're like, whoa, this feels a little much. And maybe you need to know that you can kind of back off and take a little bit of self-time. You can let someone else into your world about how that is for you and why you need it and what feels about it. Maybe you don't rush in and you have kind of differentiated lives with someone, so that you basically more like go on a series of dates and kind of hang out somewhat, but you're not really looking to try and sort of build a more substantive base with each other until you would know that that's something that you wanted to do. And by the way, there's plenty of guys that have exactly that same experience, right? Where it's like, yeah, I haven't dated someone for a long time. And when they do come around, I'm kind of slow to get into it. And that's fine. We all just have to kind of honor ourselves in that, I think. It's complicated by the death of my former partner. Wow, I'm sorry. Yeah, that sounds tough. My hope is that if you're meeting with the right kind of guy, that he's going to be sensitive to that. And you might have a very individual, unique path that you need to unfold with him in order that you would feel safe and trusting and all that good stuff. So just honor that. I think honor that, and that has its own law of unfoldment, I think. And I don't think you can rush that, as you say, taking each day as it comes. And I think you'll know if you're in good hands with someone. And maybe for you, it's actually not about trying to find some kind of partnership. Maybe it's actually just about you might want some connection, right? There might be some healing. There might be a healing relationship that even wants to happen for you, where really it's more of a companionship, and we're not trying to show up for each other more than when we do show up for each other. We're kind of in the space, and we can kind of be real and be seen and witness and hold each other. And that you might want some of that sort of time with someone before you even consider anything that's anything more than that. Yeah, I wish you well with that. Should someone be honest about having a mental illness up front in dating? That's a good question. My view of that is there's no shame in having mental illness. So I think there's no shame in mentioning that as early as you feel comfortable. And it's presumably part of your life. And for anyone that wants to be in relationship with you, they would need to know that about you. And if they can't really be with that, that's a great filter. And I think I would be encouraging you to develop as healthy a relationship as you can with whatever it is that's going on for you, so that when you bring it to someone, it's sort of like, yeah, this is real. This is me. This is what's going on. And it's not like an easy place for you to feel like someone else can bring shame, or someone else can have you feel rejected or something like that. It's like, yeah, take it or leave it, really. I'm doing me, and this is me, and this is what's true, and this is my expression, and this is my form in this life. So I'm, again, it might sound like a bit of a broken record, but this whole live stream where we started was about, can we find the right guy? How do we know? And my view is that the right guy is not turned off by anything really to do with you, right? Sure, there may be things we have to navigate. Sure, there may be things we have to make adjustments. Sure, there may be some things we have to find compromises, ways of working with them. Could be all sorts of things. But it's not like if you say a thing, suddenly you become the wrong person. And my belief is really that they were never the right person for you. So that's my way of looking at that. Wow, Lisa, thank you. I appreciate you sending in some super chat. Bay Area love, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you're finding this valuable, and I appreciate it when people support the time that's invested here. Thank you. P.S. Your insights and intuition are incredible. Thanks so much. Your energy is so valuable. I can't wait to work with you in the future. Awesome. Yeah, I hope we do get to work together in the future. As I said to maybe, I don't know, lost track of time here a little bit, but I will be launching a group program sometime later this season. So if you're interested in being in part of a smaller community with me, then keep your eyes and ears posted. One of the ways to hear early about that is if you look under any of my videos on YouTube, you'll see a link that says click here for the real freedom guide. And that's a little, well, it's not little, it's kind of a substantive ebook that I wrote. And when you click that, you could become part of my my mailing list. So I'm just going to put a little link here. I think this is the one that works. If you click that, you should be able to become part of my mailing list, and the mailing list will hear first. I will also post to the YouTube channel in the community comments to let people know that I'm launching a group program, but I just wanted to flag that that is in the work for those of you that like this and that actually would like me to know more about you personally and kind of get to know me over a period of time and vice versa. That's probably going to be the best arena to do it. Be saucy. I appreciate your YouTube name. You're truly gifted. Keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right track with what you're saying. Applied your advice to my life, and that's all worked. Wow. I love it. I love it. I love that you have listened, and I love that it's helped you. That's really, yay. That makes it fun and exciting for me. Renee says, married for 40 years. My husband died 6 months ago. I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry. That sounds tough. Having concerns. How do you keep who you were with him emerging into possible new relationships? Yeah, I hear you, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that question. I think when you've had a connection with someone and, if you've shared life with them for 40 years, it feels to me like that is its own sacrosanct thing that is sort of untouchable, that it's there, and it's there in the memories, it's there in the life that was lived together. And my sense is that different connections have different sort of flavors, truths to them. So I think part of what you do is you actually just don't really try and make a comparison, that whatever connections or new relationship possibilities emerge in your life, sort of each unto its own, in a way that like it might just be a completely different thing than what you've experienced. It might not be as serious. It might not be anything like you've had. It might just have its own lesson that's light, that's here to teach you. So I think it's just allowing everything its place in your life and place in your heart. And I think the right new connection, whether that's just a casual companion or if it's something that's more involved, that they'll get that they're not here to replace what you had in your life. They're here to be with you now and to be with who you are now. And part of being with you now includes this place you have in your heart for what was. So I don't think you trespass on what was by being with what is. I think actually in some ways you honor yourself and your life by being with what is, and that you maybe make space for revealing if there's stuff that comes up for you that reminds you of what you had with this person, or just feelings that are bubbling up, that maybe there's space for that, and that they include that. And my hope is that you might be connecting with secure enough men that it's okay to hear about something that happened in the past for someone else without that being something they can't really be with or hear. So yeah, I wouldn't try and arrange it too much. In a way, I sort of get this image of life just kind of holding you, right? That like you've been through a really tough time, and that you want sort of enfolding by life and support, and that's probably available for you if you can kind of tune into it and feel into it, and full permission to be with what's true. If you're hanging out with someone else, but really what's happening is you're fully in grief for what was, that's kind of real, So as I see it, I would just love for you to have the maximum permission to be real, to be with what is, to not have the future need to look a certain way, to not get too worried about kind of dishonoring, or just, you might have a whole day where you think about what was. You might have a week where you don't think about it at all. And that if that's real, that's kind of all we can ask for you as a human, is to be as real as you can and just do your best. Hey, Andred, thanks that you've been following the channel for a while, and this is the first time on live chat. This actually is only the second live stream I've done. Clearly, when I do live stream, I kind of go for it, because the last one was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I thought that was a long time, and now here we are. I'm going to take this through to the 3-hour mark, and then I'll probably start to wrap up. So if you have a question you haven't asked, we are going to be coming to the end here soon. Were you a marriage counselor before YouTube? No, I've actually never been a marriage counselor. I've been a full-time coach. I think this is my 7th year that I've been full-time coaching. And I started off coaching. Actually, I was helping people organize themselves in some ways, helping people come into right relationship with their commitments and the things that they put their attention on. And I was doing a lot of work with entrepreneurs. And I found pretty quickly that the stuff that really seemed to have the juice was actually the emotional, relational, spiritual stuff. And the conversations naturally seemed to unfold there. And that people hired me for one thing, but then what they really wanted to talk to me about was this problem they had with their partner or their boyfriend. And then I started doing some work. Some of you will know Clayton, who's a YouTuber and relationship coach. And we kind of collaborated and have a community and a whole kind of curriculum together. And it's sort of just been letting it unfold. It seems like it's not like I set out to do this specifically. When I was 21, I did want to be a coach. That was true. I did. And I remember I made this pretty cheap and cheerful business card. It said something like Jack Butler, coach and speaker, I think it was. And it had a picture that I'd taken of me at home, and it was kind of a little bit funny. And I actually got a lot of pushback, I'll be honest. I was young, and I think a lot of people were skeptical of my desire to be in that space. And I kind of got my break coaching teens. And I coached teens from less privileged backgrounds who wanted to apply to top universities. I was a Cambridge University graduate, and came from pretty humble background, so I kind of knew about that path. And then I also coached a lot of teens more generally on kind of how to accept yourself, how to be yourself, how to fulfill, follow the things you want to do in your life, and built a company with my then business partner in England, and that company still exists and does work all over the UK. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I really want to work with people on the edges of development that are really relevant to my own life. And increasingly that has been relationship, authenticity, spiritual path, inner work, sobriety, wisdom, these kind of territories. So I feel lucky. I've spent 16 years now working in the human development space, and I've always loved people and life and trying to do, what's wise and real. And yeah, it's a neat way to work. You should do more live chats. Thank you. I think I intend to. I really enjoy them, and it seems like most people enjoy them. So I think I am intending to, and yeah, just kind of watch this space. And at some point I may also get a little bit better at like being like, okay, 3 days from now, I'm going to do something so that we can do it, get on the calendar for people. Thank you for what you said on mental illness. That's a very humane take on the topic. Yeah, you're welcome. And I want to say that, I'm not a specialist in these kind of terrains, but my sense is there are so many things that at the moment people put as like a diagnosis that really the reality is it's just a spectrum, and we're all on there somewhere. And yeah, I might be heavy in something and you might be light in something else, but that there's part of us maturing as a species is actually realizing that the range of normal is way, 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 way wider than people give it credit for. And that actually we need that range, because that range helps us evolve. It helps us progress as a society. Some, minority and deviant views is always important as grist to the evolutionary mill. So I just have a lot of like, yeah, we label a lot of things to feel safe sometimes. And yeah, cool. If you need specific help, we need to get specific help. Great. But sometimes there's just so much more going on than the labels. Lauren, I started following you when you were working with Clayton. Both of you are great. I so enjoy your live chat. So many gems. Great. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I know you've been here for a long time. And yeah, I love working with Clayton. And if there are any of you watching and you haven't actually taken, Clayton and I have a joint webinar called the 3 Keys webinar, the 3 Keys to Being Relationship Ready. I would encourage you to take it. It's gotten really good feedback. People tend to find it's a really valuable use of 90 minutes. So let me see, actually, I might just be able to bring that up for you here, just as a specific link. We are going to be wrapping up. So if you've got any question, speak now, or I guess as they say, forever hold thy peace. That's the link to the free webinar. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad that touched you. I think we all have a right to feel okay. So yay, keep feeling okay. I'm a 54-year-old African-American girl, divorced for a few years. I find my male peers are going for younger women. What's a girl to do? I'm ready to date and have some fun. Well, cool. I'm glad that you're ready to date and have some fun. That's awesome. I wish you well with that path. Thanks for saying bye, Diana. So here's my take on this, is that this phenomenon you're talking about is actually, I think, happening just as much in probably, maybe not just as much, but it's certainly happening substantively in both directions. So, as I keep saying in this, you only need one guy, right? So even if it's true that, 30% of men or whatever percent of men are your age and they're dating younger women, it's like sociologically, don't let that phase you too much as the sort of universal analysis. Just kind of drop it down. You want one guy who wants to date you. And, who knows? He may be your age, he may be younger, he may be older, but we want your kind of right guy now. And I hear that, okay, yeah, maybe you had a right guy, or you were married for a long time and now you're divorced, and maybe there's a new you that's coming online and you're ready to have some fun with it. And I would just trust that the right connections would come out. Who knows? You might come back on a live stream in the future and you're dating a younger guy. It's like life has its own mystery. I know certainly previously I had experience of age gap in relationships that surprised me, but it was like, yeah, this does seem to be the right path for right now. So let's embrace it. There are certain things that it's almost like knowing and trusting that you bring value to a relationship. And there are certain things that you bring that you will have cultivated through your years that are worthy and that the right man will want and like. Right. And that I can tell you there are plenty of men that actually, even if they date and have fun and play around with younger women, they actually want a real woman. right? And a real woman is a woman that's mature and a feminine, a woman that's done some work, a woman that has some life experience, a woman that has integrated her own masculine and can hold things down and get things done. It's like there are so many gifts that you can bring to relationship that when people are playing around and having fun, they may be that they're not really tuning into, well, what is the wisdom that you might be bringing to the table? And I would try and connect with that. I would connect to what's true and authentic in you and care less really about what other men and what other younger women or whatever are doing. Just have at it. They can have their fun, do what they want to do. But what do you want? What's true for you? What has you showing up in your aliveness and power for your dating? And Marlene says, yeah, she's glad you asked that question. And Lisa, you're welcome. I'm glad you're liking the live streamings, and I'm glad the links have been helpful. Thank you for this evening. Actually stayed up into the wee hours in Germany. Hey, I appreciate that. I get that it's what we call stupid o'clock right now in Europe, as in it's in the very early hours of the morning. And if you're up, I appreciate you staying up. So thank you. I'm sure what you're investing in your relationship education will come back to you. Is there a question here? How do I let go of being triggered by his past actions when now he's finally showing up for me? Still hurts so much. Yeah, that can be so hard, right? Where there's these things in the past that you're hurt and you kind of don't want to bring that into the moment, but it's kind of still there. Maybe you actually just need to set aside a decent amount of time with him and work it and go through it. And kind of, if you need to, do your journaling beforehand, kind of like bring your list of hurts. Train him if you need to about what would have you release them, right? Often this comes down to how do you accept an apology? And maybe you have a specific apology language, or maybe there's a specific thing you need to hear, or that for you, for you to feel an apology, you need a gift. For some people, they just need to hear, I'm sorry. For some people, they need to hear, I'm sorry, and I'm going to repent. There's a whole thing about apology languages you can look into. But I would encourage you to bring that in your space. And if that doesn't work, that you can't do that together, I would get some support. And I would create a specific space with someone, a professional or a good friend, if they have that ability to hold space, and kind of work it, because it's important. And, the holy grail of relationship is not that you never get triggered, because you will get triggered. But the holy grail of relationship might be that you are holding on to some things from the past here that you actually are willing and ready to let go of. So yeah, put the priority on that. When we started dating, he was still grieving his marriage. He'd done many things that showed he wasn't truly there for me, and the trust disintegrated. Yeah, so that is difficult. I just want to support you and just say, when you're relating with a guy and he's not really available for whatever reason, because he's still dealing with stuff, he's still going through his own grief, that's just kind of hard, because there may be some ways that you kind of needed someone to show up for you, or wanted them to at least, and they couldn't. And now he is, and he's kind of maybe, as a guy, we kind of maybe don't want to be judged on where we were. We kind of want to be judged on, well, like, here, right now, today, I'm available and I'm connecting with you. So you might just need to cut yourself a little bit of slack and self-love, and know that it's okay if that created some trust issues. And those trust issues may need to be materialized. I'll tell you, as a guy, what I think I want is for you just to trust me, right? What I really want is that you do actually trust me, and that I might have to do some work to gain that trust at times. And sometimes that's frustrating as a guy. You kind of like, I'm a good guy, I'm trustworthy, can't you trust me? And the reality is that trust isn't always present, and there's things that trespass upon it, or there's other things that happen in your life that might trespass upon it. So when we're at our best as guys, we kind of realize that trust isn't just de facto, and it isn't just because you trusted me yesterday, you fully trust me today. It's like you might open and close. Today you might be more trusting, tomorrow you might feel less trusting. And I think as guys, sometimes we have to allow for that, as long as you're also willing to show up and kind of let us do the work with you to rebuild that trust, and create that foundation. And I don't think it's a bit like courage. I don't think the answer is that I always feel courage, right? Courage is I have some fear and I still try and step in my courage. Trust can be a bit like that. It's like everything is like not feeling great today, and I'm still going to try and trust, right? I'm still going to try and step into it rather than and kind of minimize myself. Do guys like alpha women? I think some guys like alpha women. I think if we were talking in sort of gross orienting generalization, I think most men that have a masculine essence, which is probably most of them, I don't know, 70, 90% of them, probably have a desire to be with a woman that has a more feminine essence than they do, because that creates the polarity. And that polarity can be created in many ways, right? So yeah, if I'm a man that has a more feminine essence, I might absolutely want to be attracted to a woman that has a masculine essence. So I think it's just kind of whatever works. I think there can sometimes be these sort of more superficial types of attraction, right? Where it's kind of like, yeah, I want to be dominated, or I want to experience certain things, or the sort of the bullbuster woman might be kind of like an archetype that I'm attracted to. Whether that's what I really want when I think about settling down or marriage or these kind of longer term commitments, that might be slightly different. So I just want to make sure that if, for any of you that identify as alpha women, that you're not stuck in a persona of the alpha woman, that it's actually like, yeah, when your alpha is online, so to speak, you can let it be expressed, and that you're not sort of fixed, or there's not like a reason in the past that had you kind of believe you have to be this way, and that's sort of showing up. So it can be a good place of inquiry. So what can allow you maybe the flexibility and freedom to express more of you? Is it a healthy relationship with a man in a marriage with a child and the same time he has girlfriends for years? Is it enough to know about the wife and the girlfriend? Well, you know, I'm generally a fan of people being in the truth with each other. So if you've got like a third wheel situation, right, where I think if I'm understanding this right, there's a marriage, but there's also a girlfriend. I'm much more of a fan of that if that's transparent and open, right? There could be a scenario where that works for people. And there could be a whole lot of scenarios where that really doesn't work. And actually what the girlfriend wants is a guy to really be available and show up for her. And there's a kind of attracting an unavailable man. And what the wife wants is her husband to kind of honor her and actually be in an exclusive relationship with her. So if that works, fine. But I'm imagining that for most people, that doesn't work. Sometimes it's inconvenient. You might meet someone and it's really true to be with them, but you don't meet them at a time when they are unpartnered, right? That can be true. And I'm more of a fan of saying, hey, there might be something here. If you want to resolve your current situation or end your current relationship, you can give me a call, but I don't want to get involved in trying to play a love triangle out with you. So, you know, guys generally grow by being with the truth. And sometimes there are these situations where people are willing to be the sort of affair girlfriend that's sort of stopping the man actually being with the truth. And the truth might be, I love two people. That might be true. Or the truth might be, yeah, actually right now I don't feel that loving towards my wife and I feel more loving towards my girlfriend. But how as a man are you going to really be with that and deal with that and show up and resolve it? You know, it might be that you resolve it by recommitting to your marriage. You know, it might be you resolve it by getting separated. But sort of being that third wheel, I've often seen is really hurtful for people because it kind of helps. It doesn't help keep a belief that I'm worthy of a relationship with the right man and I'm worthy of his full attention in that relationship. It can kind of erode a little bit of people's self-worth and self-esteem that like, oh, I'm a bit of an afterthought, or oh, I'm something to be ashamed of, or I'm a kind of quiet, dirty secret. And that's not really what I want for you. You know, I want you to be in a loving, present relationship where a guy can squarely put his attention on you, if that's what you want. But I assume that most of you, that's what you probably want. Nikki, I'm glad you were missing me and that you're grateful for this conversation. Thanks for being here. Renee, bye to you. Thanks for being here. Diana, I'm glad that this was hella valuable. I think I'm alpha beta. Yeah, great. I mean, I guess my question is what sort of works for you and what do you want in a guy? What kind of guy is going to be a good fit for you? Helen, awesome show. I'm watching the reading now. Thanks for coming on at the perfect time. Glad to be here. Luna, hey to Brazil. Claudia, thanks for being here for your first time. Hello to Jamaica. And yes, I'm sure you're not the only one that's a fan of the love triangle. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think sometimes it's true that these things don't come about at the best time. I think love sometimes has its own rhythms that aren't necessarily neatly aligned with all our human agreements all the time. And if you can make some courageous decisions within that to do the right thing that honors what is while taking a stand for what could be, I think that's the best orientation. And sometimes a guy might know that really actually he does want to be with you, but you know, he made a commitment to someone else and he's going to honor that. And that might be what it is. And you have to know that, oh, there's this guy I could have this thing with, but he's actually going to stay and honor and that might be him really being a man in that situation, you know? So, all right, I got to the bottom. I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to place this link again. If you haven't done our webinar, click that link and make it happen. And I will be doing live streams again in the future. So I welcome you to come and join me for those. I'm also going to place this link. If you want to join my mailing list, you can just click this Real Freedom Guide. That will have you be part of my mailing list. And I look forward to hopefully being part of a group program with some of you in the coming weeks when we get that running. So thanks for giving time on your Sunday to be here. Thanks for those of you that are watching after the event. And together we can be better and stronger in this. So thanks so much. I'm Jack.